Anyway, Alex, I hope you have a wonderful show. Will I see you tomorrow as well?
Yeah.
Hey, excellent.
I'll be nicer to you.
Oh, good. Empowerment. Alex is up next. Thank you so much for your support and for all your comments. Lots of you getting in touch about Keir Starmer and the terrible start that they have actually had to their government and to his premiership. The question is, can he actually make amends in the new year? We shall see. Alex Phillips is up next. I will be back, you'll be delighted to know, from 6 o'clock tomorrow for Morning Glory. Thanks ever so much for your company. Stay tuned. Alex is next.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Well, good morning and welcome to the show. This is Alex Phillips with you for 3 whole hours on the eve of Christmas Eve here on Talk, the home of common sense, on DAB Plus radio, on YouTube, on your smart speaker, your connected device, and of course on our wonderful app. If you haven't downloaded it, give yourself an early Christmas present, because you know that funny period between Christmas and New Year where you don't know what day of the week it is and you don't really know what planet you're on. That is when you need to go on the app and go back through all the archives. You can actually just go, I'm going to pretend it was a happier time of... Yeah, I don't know either. I don't know what's been a happier time in 2024. Perhaps you will let me know. Now, coming up on the show, talking about happier times, we were promised growth, weren't we, by the Labour government, by both parties in that snap general election. Well, the economy's certainly been going great guns. And the only problem is it's rather been in the wrong direction. The new figures out this morning has shown that GDP has flatlined. Woohoo! And German authorities are facing pressure to explain why a doctor accused of using a car to murder a child and 4 women at a Christmas market and injure countless others was not apprehended. despite already being well known to the police. And Sir Keir Starmer has faced strong criticism last night for pushing through yet another net zero tax hike. Struggling households could see their bills rise by as much as 56 quid following the Prime Minister's quiet approval of a new levy on plastic packaging. And thousands of travellers hoping to make it home for Christmas have been forced to arrange last-minute alternatives. Flights, ferries and trains are all cancelled across the UK, while drivers are being warned of icy conditions on the roads. This is Talk, the home of common sense, and I'm pleased to tell you, well, pleased for you, less so for me, that I'm joined in the studio by Sam Armstrong. I say less so for me because you're sniffling, you got balsam tissues or something on your eyes, like a myxomatosis-y.
Yeah, I know. I'm enduring the long-term legacy of broadcasting with Julia last week, who was particularly unwell.
Yeah, sharing is not caring.
Well, she hosted a massive, big super spreader Christmas party and then brought it back to the studio and gave it to me.
Yeah, I was there. I said, I was slightly under the weather when I went to her Christmas party.
Patient zero's been identified.
Patient zero, yeah, and it looks like it's got a pretty successful R rate in Talk Towers. Well, talking about things spreading and growing, the same cannot be said of the UK's economy at the moment. I don't see why anyone out there should be remotely surprised by this. I mean, if you were going to, kneecap one's economy, the first thing you'd do is go, let's make it really difficult for employers to, make profits, such as, tax them, which is exactly what the Labour Party have done with the so-called black hole that needed filling. This is a subject that we've revisited time and again on this show. Sir Keir Starmer would say, well, look, I don't want to be judged on right now. We've made tough decisions because we need to pump all of this extra money into infrastructure, into the health service, into the things that this country needs to function efficiently. You just blow your nose there, Sam, don't you worry, I can fill the time. All the stuff that's needed to make the economy function efficiently, but we will reap the dividends of this policy, not now, but tomorrow. It's the jam tomorrow ethos that we've heard of successive governments. Do you think that there's any way, shape or form that this economy can turn around under the Labour government?
Well, I think Keir Starmer's problem is this, which is the economy was growing in the first half of this year. It was slow. We're talking about 0.6%. You double that, you get 1.2%. You really want to be enjoying, in historic terms, growth of 2-3%. There was a time that this country's economy grew by 5% every year, which is a level that people can really see themselves getting wealthier. But Labour come in, they talked down the economy all summer, and business was saying, what are you doing here? What are you doing? We can see overseas investors being put off. We can see people getting less excited. And this data here is all of the evidence of that. But then what we don't have is the impact of this budget, right? Because this budget came at the end of this period. So what we don't have is the impact on employers being able to employ people, because the taxes they pay, the tax they have to pay in order to hire someone to come work for them, assuming they're employed rather than self-employed, so you can see what's going to happen there, have gone up. And that's going to work its way through as yet another hit. Now, they're right. They're going to bung a load more money on the NHS. Basically, what they're going to do is they're going to hire a load more locum doctors, probably from overseas.
But I want you to say that because GP surgeries are of the cohort who have said the increase in employees' national insurance is going to affect them as well.
Well, and this is it. And this is always the problem with trying to tax and spend yourself out of economic trouble, which is you take a bit from him, then you need to give a bit more to them, and then you need to take a bit more from them, and the cycle goes round and round and round and round. So the truth is, I fear that we're going to endure a recession next year, because this is the first quarter of no growth. I suspect we're going to see negative growth in this quarter. We might even see 2 quarters of that. That is either a technical recession or pretty much a full-on recession. And that will be, I think, the first time that a new government has so quickly, through the decisions that it has taken, sent us into a recession. Even Liz Truss didn't manage that.
Poor Liz, I'm quite sympathetic towards Liz. I know Liz quite well, and listening to what she has sort of said about the way the Bank of England behaved ahead of her budgets being announced, it does concern me that whatever rosette goes on, the candidate who ends up in number 10, we seem to have a sort of civil service out there. We seem to have a nebulous now of entities, from the OBR to, well, you name them, Bank of England's in there, who have more power and more influence than whoever ends up in government, and seem to call the shots. And repeatedly, they seem to call it for managed decline.
Well, and it's been very interesting to see who's recognised that. No other than Keir Starmer or Morgan McSweeney, his chief of staff we read in the newspapers, have turned around and said, oh, I can see what Dominic Cummings, who went in there, of course, under Boris and tried to blow it all up from the inside, was saying, which is everything we try and do doesn't work, and there is something deeply, deeply sick about the way that this country governs itself.
And yet, I remember in the King's Speech, which of course is the first opportunity that the new Prime Minister has to outline their programme of government, I remember Sir Keir Starmer announcing no fewer than 11 quangos in that. Oh, a Skills Britain committee or something, more powers to the OBR. It seems to me that he came in and went directly for the big state route, which now he's complaining about.
Well, quite right. I mean, no worse example than Great British Energy, an energy company that's going to cost us £10 billion and not even produce any energy. It's going to sit somewhere in the middle, buying up stuff, selling up stuff, all at taxpayers' expense. We know they have a long history of losing money. But look, this is the trouble with every Labour government that comes in. They immediately pull the lever of more spending, more taxes, and it takes them a while to realise that actually that isn't how you grow the economy. And look, where have they put a load of money? Paying off the unions. What have they not got in exchange for paying off the unions? Basic reforms to the way in which they function, so that train drivers, for example, are expected to work a full day's work in very much the way that you or I would think what working looks like. But no, they give them the money first, they ask questions later. And I know Keir Starmer was very disappointed about that, but he was just, of course, one of many to have felt defrauded by his then Transport Secretary. There's
definitely a naivety with this government, and that's sort of the mildest commentary that I can give, I think. But is there a chance, I mean, given that they have sat there and gone, OK, we're not being allowed to do what we want to do by the apparatchiks of Whitehall, who have essentially tied our hands behind our back. We've seen the light now, the scales have fallen from our eyes. Is there a possibility there could be a Christmas miracle and Sir Keir Starmer might make a New Year's resolution and say, do you know what, I'm going to start cutting when it comes to the amount of the bureaucracy, the red tape of the civil service? I'm going to sort of actually, in the spirit of Brexit, understand what so many of my predecessors have said before. And because he's got a big majority, he might actually be able to do something about that.
Zero chance whatsoever. Keir Starmer is first and foremost a North London lawyer, and he buys into this legalistic system by which anyone can challenge decisions made by any different government, the whole culture of judicial review, of human rights claims, of people frustrating and blocking their removal from this country. He was the lawyer that was bringing exactly these claims and breaking that system, changing that system, going back to a kind of common law legal system, which is what the likes of Jonathan Sumption are suggesting, would involve massive totemic change that would be uncomfortable, would be unpleasant, and for those in the Westminster world.
Maybe everyone's capable of a sort of Damascene conversion, right? And knowing that you worked closely with Robert Jenrick, he is such a man who had a Damascene conversion. As far as I'm aware, he had said to someone we both have in common that when he went into the Home Office as Minister for Immigration, he suddenly became radicalised by reality. We all saw a sort of One Nation Tory turn into, you know, one of the sort of most snapping, right-wing, grassrootsy, true blue Tory that the party could boast. So is it possible, actually, is it possible that anybody, when they find themselves in a situation where the real world, you know, smacks them between the eyes, can suddenly go, oh, I got this wrong?
Well, normally people, as they get older, tend to track over to the right. It's the great saying, if you're not a communist in your youth, you've got no heart, and if you're not a conservative in your dotage, you've got no brain. But people in the Labour Party, those surrounding Keir Starmer, are very much the exceptions to that rule. They've been going through life and they've been tracking to the left, although maybe not quite as left as he once was for Keir Starmer. He now recognises the royal family, for example, which in an earlier age he was a Republican. But he is someone that is ideologically wedded to a world that is very different from that he's confronting. I suspect he will get some of the way, but I don't think what we're looking here in Keir Starmer is like a Tony Blair figure, someone from the left, but that went in practically, might not agree with everything he did, but was able to look at a lot of these problems and solve them, and even now offers government advice. I remember during lockdown, he was more of a lockdown sceptic than many around government, I think because of his sense and his knowledge of how government works. I don't think Keir Starmer's that kind of intellect.
One thing I would say that maybe the left wing historically could be accused of is the politics of gerrymandering, really, you know, trying to cling on to power at all costs and actually sort of manoeuvring in order to do this. Now, I'm quite alarmed at some of the things the Labour Party have done. If I was sitting there working in an election campaign in the developing world, I'd be calling it out for what it is, which is fiddling around with the political system to try and enshrine power for futurity. Now, first of all, we had the Labour Party suggest that perhaps they want to look at the structure of things like unitary authorities. So maybe the local elections next May might not happen while they do that. And I thought to myself, you're probably going to lose a lot of local councillors, aren't you? And Reform could do very well out of that. Then all of a sudden you have the IPPR think tank, a very left-wing think tank, somehow out of nowhere produce a report saying, maybe we should look at the provenance of funding for political parties, particularly if they come from individuals who are overseas. And then this was given to ELCOM, and then Sir Keir Starmer said, oh, yes, 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 we must look into that. Now, the Labour Party have a rich history of taking donations from people who are not necessarily British-born. And you kind of think to yourself, oh, is this because they're worried that the Reform Party might be getting a big charity cheque from the likes of Elon Musk, even if it were through a UK-based entity? Now, we suddenly find out that they want to look at the right to vote for 16 and 17-year-olds because, like you said, a lot of youngsters sort of grow up with that beautiful, soft ideology that the world would be much better if we all shared everything, and are therefore more inclined to vote for the left. When I look at these three things put together, it looks to me no better than a cheap dictator of a banana republic trying to make sure that they stay on in power, even though they're failing.
Absolutely right. There has never been an administration that has crashed in popularity quite so quickly. Frankly, there's never been an administration that entered government with so little support. We forget this, of course. Keir Starmer's got a supermajority in Parliament, but he got fewer votes than Jeremy Corbyn did in 2017, right? This is not a popular guy. This is someone whose opposition was split between Reform, Conservatives, those staying at home and protest at how bad the last government was. And every step he's taking is designed to keep him there for as long as possible. And it's not just the three steps you outlined. He's also trying to fiddle with the House of Lords. He kicked out the Conservative-dominated hereditary peers, and last week, to replace them, he appointed 30 new Labour peers. Labour say, oh, we're not even sure on the House of Lords. Well, they were pretty sure last week when they stuffed it with their cronies.
Yeah.
People who had failed to get re-elected, people that had had a long history of scandal and all the rest of it. They were all happy to shove them up there. Sue Gray leading the way.
Oh, yeah. Of course, I almost forgot that. Blimmin' heck. It's shocking. I mean, I genuinely think I'm quite worried about this. I'm very worried about this. Even when you look at the appointment over in America as a US ambassador in the shape of Lord Mandelson, this is a political appointment, the likes of which hasn't happened since the 1970s. Normally, these people come from the diplomatic corps, who are sort of trained in the business of how the Foreign and Commonwealth Office works. And I know Peter Mandelson is technically a very experienced politician. We know that he sort of his orbit tends to be that of around Brussels. And you kind of, I get the impression with the Labour government, they've gone, right, we've got this stonking great majority, which frankly we probably don't deserve. I think they're very aware of that. They know how unpopular they are. And I think they're trying to do as much as possible, as quickly as possible, to ram things through, to really get their agenda just baked in, whether it's the appointment of all of these quangos and so forth, and GB Energy, and oh, there's a black hole, we need all your money right now in the very first budget because we've got to pay for all of our extreme socialism. But then fiddling about, like you said, at every single level, voting age, House of Lords, party donations. I'm sorry, but this looks like the sort of politics that you get in a country like Tanzania.
Yeah, and Peter Mandelson, of course, is a bonkers appointment. This is someone that has been as offensive as you could possibly be to Donald Trump for as long as you possibly could. And look, Donald Trump, whatever you think of him, is somebody who likes this country. He likes this country. He's been very clear. He's got a Scottish family. He likes this country. And that comes after Joe Biden, who actively disliked the UK. He was from that sort of Irish-American extract that viewed us with some suspicion. And that presents us with an opportunity, or it could have done. We could trade on that goodwill. We could trade on that like for us. And, you know, we could enjoy new trading relations. We could build things together. We could do all of this. And what Peter Mandelson does is he throws all of that away. Now, I've got no problem with politicians being ambassadors. I think they can often be very good ones. We've seen good ones over here from the likes of Australia, for example, where it's very common for retired politicians to be ambassadors. But if you'd asked me to pick a worse choice for that job, I couldn't have done it than Peter Mandelson.
And yet he's there saying, look, I would be willing to work with Farage. I don't think he's really got a choice. I think my view of this is if you've got someone like Nigel Farage who may have the presidency, who we know will, you know, be over there at inauguration and no doubt be chatting away with the Donald. I'm sure that they speak on the phone from time to time. That actually, if you don't have him inside the tent doing the proverbial in the outwards direction, you're going to find quite the opposite.
Well, and that's right. I mean, America has been very clear that it wants to clamp down on what it perceives as trade abuses around the world. Now, some of them could, for example, be putting further massive tariffs on the likes of Airbus, who people in Belfast work for big facilities out there making their aircraft, and that could put them out of business, out of work. He could put tariffs on Scotch whisky, for example. He could withdraw support and military aids that he's often provided for our projects. We need this alliance more than any other. But, of course, it's not just a binary thing, right? It's not just, are we friends to them or not? We're not. If we can't rely on the US as much, to whom do we have to turn?
Oh, yeah,
Brussels
back
and
to
the EU.
Brussels. I know, shouldn't we be so lucky? Oh, don't make me go back into the pit and go through it all again. It was hard enough first time around. Right, we're going to take a short break now, but don't go anywhere because there is so much to chew over. 2 days before Christmas, we're going to be filling up your cup with common sense. If you want to join us in that process, the number is 03444991000. If you dial that, hopefully we'll get you on the blower after this break. You can alternatively send me a WhatsApp message using that number, or leave me a voice note. I do like a little voiceo. It's nice to just sit there. I never know. It's like a bit of a Christmas cracker. The producer presses go and you don't know what's going to come out. So same number for that. If you'd like to send me a good old-fashioned text message, 8722. Remember to put the word talk before your text. That way it manages to wend its way through the pinball satellites up there in the ether. It avoids the International Space Station where those two poor people are trapped. I hope they have a decent Christmas. And it pings the aerials on top of the talk towers right here and ends up in this Cape Canaveral in front of me. Right, without any further ado, here are the things that pay my wages, and I'll see you in just a couple of minutes.
insurance contributions for employers. They said that didn't amount to putting up NIC's contributions on working people, which was, of course, a pledge in their manifesto.
Do you believe that?
No, I think that they should have been explicit before the election. They should have said we're going to have to introduce it. They should have been honest that you have to split national insurance contributions and they have to put it up. But of course, they didn't want to be labelled as same old Labour tax and spend, put up your taxes.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back to the show. Have you done your rapping? Is that what you're doing right now while you're listening to me? Have you already started on the sherry? I wouldn't blame you if you had. I'd be envious if you are. But let me keep you company all the way through to 1 o'clock as you probably start the preparations for Christmas. I bet a lot of you now have signed off for the holidays. Don't worry, I'm going to keep you company throughout Christmas. I'm going to be here from 10 till 1, everything other than Christmas Day because, well, no one's here on Christmas Day. We get to actually enjoy it. And Boxing Day, because that is Alex Mass. That indeed is the day that I was born, so I've given myself that day off as well. Let's speak to David now, who is in South Wales. Hi, David. Bore da, as I always say.
Oh, bore da. Should I hear you? I was thinking about the Labour Party policy with the budget.
Yes.
And they seem to not thought it through because I have every confidence that businesses will continue to make profits. But what were they at the cost of people's jobs? Right. So it is, the businesses will survive. People won't, not in the... I
think you're absolutely right. By the way, was that Happy Christmas you just said to me in Welsh?
No, I just asked how are you today?
I'm afraid I might be called Phillips and I might have a bit of an accent, but it's actually West Country, and so Borodar is where it begins and ends with me, I'm afraid. And I didn't want to look like John Redwood doing the national anthem there, you know, and sort of goldfish at you. And I think you're right about the businesses, you know, because when in a situation of, OK, do I save my business? Do I make sure the shareholders are happy or that I can pay staff I've already got or pay my suppliers or whatever it is? A business isn't going to be like, oh, I know, I'm going to employ some more people or keep the staff body I've got that I can no longer afford at the cost to the profit margins. They're just that isn't what businesses do. They're not charities. And then this is a government, of course, that promised worklessness was going to be a thing of the past. They've scoffed at the Tories and pointed the finger of accusation when it comes to the unsustainable levels of immigration and sort of suggested they're going to do something about it. But this is clearly not the right approach.
No, I grew up with a Labour Party that was for the working people. And in the South Wales valleys, it was very important. We've still got the hereditary vote going to the Labour Party in Wales, which are a bunch of clowns. But, the thing is that they are not any longer interested in the people. It's just they are what sounds good on WhatsApp and or Facebook or whatever. It does nothing to do with people.
Right. I have a feeling the upcoming Senedd elections next year are going to be very interesting indeed. I mean, there was, of course, that one spell where you had a Labour-Plaid coalition. I just wonder if the landscape would change in Wales, because you've got an element of proportional representation in there, very Brexity part of the UK, sensible people over in Wales, particularly in the South Wales valleys. So perhaps you will no longer live under a one-party state next year. Here's hoping for you, David. Right, thank you ever so much. Let's speak now to another Dave who is in London. Hi, Dave.
Hi, Alex, how are you?
I'm very well. How are you?
I was on one of the talk programmes a while ago, and they said, "How long do you think Labour will last? One or two sessions?" And I think people said one, and I said it'll definitely be two, if not three, because they will now work on maintaining power, which is what left-wing governments do. They'll pack the House of Lords, give 16-year-olds the votes. They'll change boundaries. They'll give anyone who works the right to vote, e.g. migrants. They'll build predominantly in Tory areas because they'll hope that's another Labour voter every time they get a house. They'll stop any reform donations. They'll crack down on what they call fake news, which will be GB News, Talk News, and anyone that sort of has any kind of view against them. Then they'll block any stories that impact them. They'll make dates for trials like they have for when Trump's inaugurated in January 20th.
Oh, I know. All the big ones are coming up then, aren't they, on the 20th of January? Busy day in the courts.
Everything they do is about maintaining power, and that's it. And by the way, the left are good at it. That's what Biden did. They just shut him in a box and kept him out of the way because they knew the best way to keep power. So we've only got, I am a lifelong Tory voter. I voted Reform at the last election. I knew this would happen. I didn't realise it'd be anything as bad as this, but I knew it could be. But this is the only chance we've got now. If the country doesn't wake up and put in a reform government and completely dismantle every single quango. I'd just draw up a list if I was Richard Tice, and I would publish it and go, here are 161 quangos that on the day we come into power will cease to exist. We want a list of action items now. If Kemi Badenoch starts saying, I need to think it through, I don't know what I'm going to inherit, I think I'll fix some foundations. I'm sorry, Kemi, I want a list of very, very specific actions. I want names on the lists. I want to know what you're going to do on day one, and I want it done. No more manifestos, none of this nonsense. We want a
kind of want. I feel like you are a man who would quite like an election campaign where Farage and Tice are going around on top of the infamous double-decker bus with Miele's chainsaw telling everybody what sort of dogery they're going to be doing, like some sort of builder version of Star Wars. Yeah, well, I think a lot of people out there would agree with you. Of course, plenty of other parties are available to vote for. We have to make that very clear before our collars are felt. Let's do some of your messages now. Thank you, by the way, Dave. I really liked your insights there. Look, we were talking about this, weren't we, earlier, what Dave just said, before I go on to some of the messages, which is this idea that we have this sort of huge behemoth, this sort of glacial-paced, bureaucratic, Gordian knot of managed decline that just isn't fleet of foot, that it can't go to the places it needs to go. And, Milei has done a brilliant job in Argentina, some would say. This is a sort of viewpoint now of, what Elon Musk is supposed to be doing in the Department of Government Expenditure, Doge, over in America. Would it actually, as a man who's worked in politics, would it be possible to do here? Is this sort of one of those pipe dreams? Oh, yeah, we can do that. We're going to shrink the civil service by 2/3. We're going to get... Can it be done?
Yes, but it requires two things. Firstly, a united team led by someone who truly believes that this is what is necessary to do and is prepared to put their fingers in their ears when the howling, when the leaking, when the revenge claims of bullying and misconduct and all the rest of the nonsense that civil servants do whenever you try and take them on start coming. They have to be prepared to do that. And secondly, and this is crucial, and this is where Liz Truss fell down, you have to have a mandate to do it. You can't come in mid-term and say, I've felt this for a really long time and this is what I want to do. No, you have to come in with all of the strengths, much like Keir Starmer. When you come in with like a 150-seat majority, but even like an 80-seat majority like Boris Johnson, you can get a lot done. You've got a lot of moral legitimacy, You've got a lot of political legitimacy, and you can take that fight. Regrettably, nobody has come at it with that. Well, not since the
Boris
late
on the
1980s.
right was the only person really with the opportunity to make real change. And one feels rather that Boris ended up doing kind of the opposite when you look at immigration statistics and net zero targets. Let's do some of your messages now. This is an interesting one from Stuart. Lucy Powell tried to defend Labour's terrible effects on the economy by saying it's like turning around an oil tanker. Well, Labour has hauled the oil tanker below the waterline. I think this is what we're talking about. What we need is an upgrade. We need to get rid of the blimmin' oil tank, which is frankly the Costa Concordia at the moment, whatever that boat was called, and turn it into some sort of speed vessel. We need a catamaran or something, a hovercraft. when it comes to the operations of this country, its economy and government. Good morning, Alex, says Dave, listening in Ireland. This is a Dave-heavy show, isn't it? Lots of Dave. Got an English Dave in London, a Welsh Dave in South Wales, a Dave in Ireland. Where's my Scottish Dave? If that's you, send me a message or give me a call. I was just thinking, has Kia been doing all this international travel so he and his crew can buy all their Christmas presents duty-free? Friends and family all getting a bottle of whiskey and 200 fags, as he doesn't want to support local shops and pay the tax. Merry Christmas. Do you honestly think Sir Keir Starmer's got friends who like drinking whiskey and smoking fags? Really? I don't think he's that interesting. I can't imagine that. I'd be interested to know, if you ask Sir Keir Starmer the question of what's your favourite tipple, I'd imagine he'd be like, I don't drink. A bit like, what's your favourite book? I don't read. What's your favourite TV programme? I don't watch television. You know, do you have a soul? I don't have one of those. So there you go. Morning, Alex, says John in Rotherham. Great show. Really admire your guest, Sam. Well, we'll see. If in about 3 days' time I start getting that tingling sensation in my nose and a scratchy voice, the admiration I have for him at present will dwindle. Keep up the good work, and thanks for keeping us sane. If you're coming to me for sanity, Lord help you. Right, we'll take a short break now, and when we come back, it's time to look further afield and see what is going on in the wider world, because it may be Christmas, but there is not peace on earth. I'm back after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back to the show. Well, let us immediately get on the good ship, Alex, HMS Common Sense, Major General Chip Chapman, ex-head of counter-terrorism at the MOD. Chip, brilliant to have you on the show, and I can't think, as the former ex-head of counter-terrorism at MOD, someone better to speak to about what went on in Magdeburg. Of course, we won't have as much information or any information at all, nor do we necessarily deserve it as Brits, as the German authorities will. But it certainly hasn't stopped tongues wagging over here when it comes to motives or questions about failures in German security for this to have happened. Yet again, it's a country that has been rather plagued of late by, I'll say, terrorist attacks, and I'm doing air quotes for those who are listening and not watching, because there was another sort of terrorist attack in Essen a couple of months ago. what do you think has been the major failing? Why is this man, when it seems to me was reported repeatedly to the police over a number of years, not dealt with sooner?
Well, there are two failures to begin with. The first one is the protective security failure. So from a UK perspective, under the contest strategy, that's the counter-terrorism strategy, one of the strands of that is protect, and therefore you embed security into these crowded places events. That went wrong, which gave him access to the vehicle to allow him to plough down. The second one you have to look at is, was he what they call Gefahrder? Now, a Gefahrder in German terms is the equivalent of a subject of interest. So was he on their sort of list or target of people? And I know people have said that the Saudis gave various warnings about this, but the simple fact is in counterterrorism work there is a prioritization grid. And even if he was on that list, it is obvious that he wasn't a priority 1A or 1B candidate on that list. That is, that they had information about attack planning. Now, of course, he did do an attack. So either that was wrong, or what is really difficult, even in the age of AI and machine learning, which is some of the things which were the outcome, for example, of the 2017 attacks in the UK of vehicle as a weapon, particularly Manchester, which wasn't vehicle as a weapon, the Westminster Bridge and London Bridge, is that AI is great at some things, but it's not great at social outcomes. That is, knowing the exact moment when someone will attack. There are a number of anomalies in this, which is why at the moment it's not being called a terrorist attack. So again, the difference between those is that a grievance with no ideology is a criminal murder. A grievance with ideology would give you terrorism. Now, again, the anomaly with this guy is he seems to have rejected Islam. He may have gone towards a right-wing methodology, but actually he was a Shia, and Shia from Saudi Arabia are the minority in Saudi Arabia, hated by the majority Wahhabists, and that's another anomaly. That is why I think the German authorities at the moment have not called this yet as a terrorist attack. Now, again, to give you a comparison with two in the UK where people, again, shouted terrorist attack and it wasn't. The first one is the attack in 2021 by Jake Davidson, an incel attack, involuntary celibate attack, killed 5 people and then himself. That was deemed, again, not to be a terrorist attack because of the predominance of mental health issues with that chap. The second one was the November 21 attack on the Liverpool hospital, which may have some resonance with this one, where that, again, was not deemed to be a terrorist attack because of the grievance with this bloke, which was similar because he had problems with his immigration status. Put all that to one side, this guy will be charged with multiple murder, which is always the outcome because there's no crime in law of terrorism. There's a crime in law of common law of murdering people, which is what he did.
When we see things like this happen over in mainland Europe, we instantly worry about our own situation back here in the UK. We know that there is still a vast number of people, I'm sure, on the terrorism watch list. I remember the days when we used to have a sort of traffic light system of what the terror threat level was. I haven't heard that for a while, and thankfully, we have, of course, seen the horrific incident in Southport, but you get the impression that we're not having as many direct threats as perhaps we once were, and I don't know if that's the case actually. But how would you read our situation here, especially with things in a powder keg over in the Middle East? We know that we have had people coming into the country who are totally undocumented. I'm aware that a number of organisations who profit in part from people trafficking are terrorist organisations. And so you'd have to be concerned that we are also in a perilous position here in the United Kingdom when it comes to those who mean harm against our society. How do you read this situation? Do you think that we are in a very difficult situation right now?
Yeah, I think since 7th of October, the amount of hate crimes and extremism has been amplified, particularly by social media. Now, again, in terms of the net and gross of terrorism, there can be a lot of plots in the gross. Very few actually go on to be the net, which is the lethality of terrorist attacks. In terms of your point about a traffic light system, one of the things which may have surprised me, but is a good thing in lots of ways, is that the terrorist threat level in GB at the moment is substantial. That is, an attack is likely. It's been come down about 2 years ago from a severe, that is, an attack is highly likely. Now, neither of those in a way means that there might not be an attack tomorrow. And generally, every Christmas, you get a warning that an attack is inevitable. That is actually a securocrat cop-out. Of course, an attack is inevitable, but unless you put a time frame on that and a scale, it's a cop-out because it doesn't bound what you mean by that. Everyone needs to be vigilant, and that's always the message every Christmas. Action counters terrorism. Act, as the Counter-Terrorist Command would tell you. And if you have any concerns of anyone anywhere in the country, either for radicalisation or things you've seen, then dial 0800 789 321, because the overall message is always make nothing happen. So we need to be vigilant at all times. What I've said about the German thing, though, and this still applies to the UK thing, is this is obviously an iceberg. So, for example, the Domestic Intelligence Agency of Germany is called the BFV. They have multiple thousand Islamist terrorist personnel potential. That is, those who could go from this gross, potentially wanting to do attack planning, into taking executive action. 90% of those have a migration background. So, of course, in a future election, immigration is bound to be a concern for the future, and the party which can sort out that and the economy is going to win lots of seats.
Fascinating, albeit quite harrowing stuff there. Major General Chip Chapman, thank you ever so much for coming and giving us the unvarnished truth of the reality of the situation, both here in the United Kingdom and, of course, across Europe. Before I go to break, I just want to get your thoughts on that, Sam.
Well, look, we now have a deeply, deeply dangerous world right on our shores, and that is one of the effects, I regret to say it, of mass migration over the last 25 years, which is the threat is now within the gates. We know the fact that we need barriers around Christmas markets. Why? Why are the barriers around Christmas markets? We know why. Everybody knows why. This country has got less safe. It's a sad fact that we live in. None of our politicians seem to be prepared to call that out, or if they are, they're in a very small minority.
Do you know, it just sent a little shiver down my spine. It brought to mind the words of my very good friend who has worked for MI5, MI6, the SAS, still does lots of work in the intelligence industry, and he always says to me, Alex, stop taking the tube. And it's harrowing. Oh, shall we try and cheer ourselves up after the break? I think it's going to be difficult because we're going to be talking about the state of the NHS, but we're going to be kept good company, at least, by Roy Lilly, who's former NHS Trust Chairman. We're back after this.
got a Secret Santa.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fine. And what do you? And are you one of?
I've bought for the siblings, bought for the parents.
How many siblings?
I've got 2 siblings, but not here to show. But if I can make one semi-serious point from over
Yes.
COVID, online culture for shopping is great and Amazon is wonderful, but let's remember our small businesses.
I agree.
Which are struggling this Christmas. Where I come from, down in Honiton, Sidmouth, we have amazing small businesses in East Devon, and if you've got the opportunity to go out
politician
and buy something from a local shop,
honestly, you're speaking
it's a
like
great
a politician.
opportunity.
No, I totally
speak
agree.
like an ordinary person, David, that wants our small business to see out this Labour government.
I totally agree.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back. Now, it's not going to be any surprise if I tell you that there are people who have been treated in NHS hospital corridors. Well, it turns out the NHS is now spending a record £12.3 billion in outsourcing patients to private hospitals in a bid to clear waiting lists and, well, get the whole operation, mind the pun, a bit better oiled and hopefully reduce the amount of people blocking beds and being treated in corridors. Is it going to work? Let's speak to Roy Lilly, former NHS Trust Chairman, a man who might have some answers for us. Is it going to be enough to throw £12.3 billion to get patients into private hospitals? Do you agree with this policy? Is it the right action to take?
Well, look, there's a lot of pressure on the NHS to bring waiting lists down, and the private sector can do some of it. Most private hospitals, not all, but most private hospitals don't have ITU, don't have recovery if something goes wrong. So they can do the fairly simple stuff on patients who are relatively fit. So, I mean, it's one of these, like the advert says, every little helps. So, yes, it does help bring down part of the waiting list, but it is not a solution. The big issue we've got right now, as you were talking about earlier, is we've got patients in corridors. We've got patients in corridors because we've got patients in bed in hospital. I mean, last night there were about 13,000 people in hospital who are medically fit to be discharged, but they're frail, elderly, and we can't get them home because social services can't get the care packages together to get them home because they haven't got any money, and the domiciliary care market has been decimated anyway. So that gives us a problem. Now, what happens then if you're running a hospital? The patients are generally over 65, more often in their 70s. They're there for respiratory problems. They only need 2 or 3 days in hospital to get them back on their feet. If they've got other conditions like diabetes or whatever, you can stabilise them and they're medically fit to go home, but you can't get them home. So what happens then is your medical beds get full. When the medical beds get full, what do? Well, all you can do is to start taking medical patients and putting them in surgical beds. Now, surgical beds are the beds that we use for hip operations, knee operations, what we call elective operations, waiting list operations. So when you start encroaching on the surgical beds, that's when you have to ring round and say to people, I know you were coming in for a new hip on Tuesday, but I'm sorry, we've got no beds. So that grinds that part of it down as well. So the whole system clogs up. Why does it clog up? It clogs up every year since about 1999. We've had these problems. Is because no government since 1999 has had the idea, the innovation, or the willingness to fix social services. If you ask anybody running a hospital right now, if they had a Christmas wish, what would they wish for? They'd say fix social services, because that will free the whole system up.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to ask you, actually, when we hear this repeatedly, bed blocking, people being treated on in hospital corridors, ambulances queuing up in car parks because there's nowhere to put the patients. I remember when I was working over ITV and BBC Wales, a long time ago now, almost 20 years ago, it was a huge story then. And you think 2 decades later, why is nothing being done? Then you see that during COVID, there was all this sort of, we're going to build Nightingale hospitals, and you suddenly see people pulling out their fingers and doing things. And you have to ask yourself, why? Why is it constantly a case of just bailing out the water a little bit every Christmas and hoping it's all going to get better? Why have we not had a policy that says we are going to build, X number of care homes they might be, or we're going to, in every single town and city? We're promising you hospitals by Boris Johnson. I don't understand why every single time we circle back round to, we'll just put more money into the NHS. We're going to try and solve the problem, and it's never solved. And why no one's actually sort of grabbed the nettle on this?
It's capacity. The system just doesn't have the capacity. If you look at the beds per 100,000 population, and you look across the OECD countries or Europe, in the EU, we have fewer beds per head of population than almost any of them. And that's the difficulty. The rot set in, really, in my view. You have to wind the clock back, but it was after the world banking crisis. George Osborne was the Chancellor of the Exchequer. He embarked on the austerity program. He cut local authorities' budget by 40%. He did it in two sections, but the upshot was 40%. Now, you can't take 40% out of a system and expect it to function. Also, the NHS had under 2% funding for nearly 10 years. That meant that we didn't repair enough stuff. At the moment, there's a 12 billion outstanding backlog maintenance in hospitals. So we didn't repair enough. We didn't recruit enough, train enough, buy enough kit, innovate enough. The system is just not big enough for a society where there's an elderly population. Most people now, 75% of hospital beds will be occupied by people over 65. And we know it's coming every year. The NHS, people say, oh, well, why doesn't the NHS get ready? It does. The winter plan was actually reviewed and produced back in June because I read it and saw it then and commented on it. The fact of the matter is the NHS doesn't have enough capacity. And as you get an ageing population, the situation gets worse. We have to fix social care. Now, Johnson stood on the steps of Downing Street and said, oh, we've got an oven-ready solution. He did have. there was a solution, but it was never implemented. That's the issue.
Politics got in the way of actually delivering on political promises. Sam, I want to ask you about this, because do you think as well we have a bit of a societal or cultural issue in this country? The reason I say this is thinking about other countries, and I've had the pleasure and privilege of living in a great many. I think we're probably one of the worst countries in the world when it comes to just saying to old people, all right, you live by yourself. All right, we'll put you in a care home. You would not get away with doing that with Nonna over in Italy. Oh, no, Nonna's coming to live with you.
Yeah, and look, I think there is an extent to which, as families, as people, as communities, we have starved out some of the responsibility that human beings throughout history have always had, the bonds, the ties that we have to our family members, to the state. We don't turn around to the state and say, oh, my child needs its nappy changing every 2 days. The state needs to do that. Somebody needs to come in and care for it. No, we expect parents to do that for children. Now, of course, it's never going to be the case for everyone. Never going to be the case for everyone. But I do think a lot more families could take that responsibility. And by the way, if you ask any person who's thinking about what life's going to be like as they get older, what kind of life would they like to live? Well, it is the life surrounded by friends and family. It is the life where they don't have carers they've never met before coming into their house all hours of the day to do stuff. It's certainly not sitting in a care home. And I think you're absolutely right. I think one of the solutions, we have to look at this because, boy, every time a government has tried to look at this and fund it properly, it has all gone wrong because it just costs so much money, the care system. One of the solutions we have to look at is, for those with parents, for those with families, yes, I suspect people probably do need to do more to care for their own relatives.
Government grants for granny annexes. But it is interesting, I think, in this country socially. There are so many societal things that underpin so many problems we have at the moment. And no government ever wants to meddle in anything at a societal level. They sort of think that their job is to sit there and do input into the system, and this is money here, money in, money out, and so on and so forth. And yet I think if we were able to address some of those, or at least sort of say to the general public, look, there is an agency here. You live in this country and you have a part to play as well in making this. But it's almost like sounding like David Cameron and big society now. But I think it is something that I think we need to start really considering.
Yeah, you only need to look at the baby birth gap we have in this country. Far too many children being born in this country at the moment. It's a real problem. That relies on everybody to, go out and have more babies. But you'll never hear a government minister saying that.
Pro-natalist policies, I agree with those as well. I could hear Roy was actually champing at the bit to get back in there, but I'm afraid we don't have enough time. Thank you ever so much, Roy. Let's pick up on this topic again, because I have a feeling he had some really great points he was going to make there. But alas, I've got to take a short break now. But fear not, there is still 2 more hours of unbridled Phillipsisms coming over the hill for you. I am back just after this. Stay tuned to Talk, the home of common sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to the show. This is Alex Phillips with you until 1 o'clock here on the eve of Christmas Eve. What are you doing? Are you wrapping presents? Are you getting ready with your turkey already? I don't know, it might be a bit premature there. Are you sort of, I don't know, moving home to fit in a brand new oven so you can put that beast in? That's always the big difficulty of the turkey, isn't it? You've got, not only have you got the turkey to cook, you've got the sort of satellite dishes, from your Brussels sprouts to your stuffing to your sausage meat, your pigs in blankets, your Yorkshire puds, your roast potatoes, your parsnips, all of that stuff. And yet by the time you're like, oh yeah, look at this lovely big bird all dressed up nice, in it goes, you're like, oh, I need a whole, like, 5 Argos now to do the other things. It's like sort of military level coordination. Tell me what you're doing. 0344 499 1000 is the number if you want to send me a WhatsApp message, or even better, leave me a voice note. I love those. And plus, if you're sort of wrapping presents, it's so much easier. You could probably, if you're really sort of dexterous, monodexterous, you could sort of wrap with one hand, press the little microphone button on your phone and sort of do sound effects. But I'm wrapping a present as I'm recording this. Anyway, let me know. And also let me know your thoughts on all things going on that we're talking about today. Your contribution is what makes this radio station so special. As I like to say, it's like community catharsis, group therapy, if you will. We all get together and we share our thoughts, our feelings, our opinions. We share the joy and the laughter, and that's now sounding like a Cliff Richard song. 8722 is the number to text. Put the word talk before your text. That way, it manages to get through all of the overactive satellite dishes, beaming cruddy Christmas classics onto your television sets right now. Playing on loop, I don't know, Cliff Richard, I just named him, didn't I? Mariah Carey, all the rest of it. And it wends its way through all of the dross into this very studio where I can read it out. We're on X at talkTV. OK. Let's crack on, shall we? And welcome to the show, Mike Neville, former Met Police Detective Chief Inspector. Mike, let's start off very quickly with your thoughts on the horrific Magdeburg Christmas market attack over in Germany. A response in Birmingham was to temporarily close their Christmas market. We're seeing sort of fortifications now around what should be, you know, these wonderful, joyful getting-togethers in the UK, sort of armed guards and barricades, and it just makes the heart cry, really, doesn't it? But what are your feelings on what's gone on in Magdeburg and where we're at in Europe in general?
It's absolutely dreadful, isn't it? So I was out in Germany in 2016 after the mass sexual assaults on women in Cologne on the New Year's Eve. And there I was the police advisor to the German police. And what struck me there is that the authorities tried to cover it up for 3 days before it all came out, and it resulted in the police president being sacked. And we see this everywhere, that there's an attempt to sort of cover up the truth. What strikes me here is that the German police have been far quicker to release details saying that the man was from Saudi and giving all sorts of information about him, which is quite at variance with how our government dealt with the Southport incident, the terrible murders there, where it took about 3 months, you know, having been told he was a sort of Cardiff choir boy who did it. So I think throughout Europe, there's real issues that we have millions of people here that we have no idea about. We don't know their motives, but we know there's a real problem with Islamic terrorism, and people are very frightened. And when people can't go out to something as simple as a Christmas market or a celebration on New Year's Eve, which the Cologne incident was, it's absolutely terrible for our society that our politicians have let us down so badly.
Mike, I'm glad you brought up the Cologne incident. I wasn't expecting to go down this route today, but I want you to remind the audience of what happened then, because I'm very aware of what happened. It harrows me to this day, but essentially it was around it was over 1,000 sexual assaults, even a few rapes. It was 1,250, I can't remember, but you will know, that took place, coordinated in Cologne Square, and pretty much all of the perpetrators were men from the Northeast, North Africa and the Middle East. Tell us what happened on that horrific night.
So there was hundreds, if not, as you say, 1,000 sex attacks where women were molested, indecently assaulted, even raped by mass gangs who seemed to be coordinated, who were all allegedly Syrian refugees. People really don't know where they were from. And it all occurred around the Cathedral Platz, the main square near the railway station. And as I've said, the reaction of the authorities was to cover it up, which was an utter scandal. And of course, the women were brave enough to have recorded this on their mobile phones and the like. And this was subsequently used as evidence. That the German police haven't got much experience of dealing with images, things from CCTV and mobile phones. That's why I was sent to assist them. And many of the people were identified. by British police super recognisers who went there, and some German super recognisers who we found. But it just shows the sort of conspiracy that there is to keep people silent, to stop them speaking about this. And what we end up with is the terrible incidents we see. And I think one of the questions is, why didn't the German authorities act on all this information that they've been given about this psychologist, the guy from Saudi? The trouble is, there are too many of these people and too much information for the police and the authorities, the secret services, to act upon. So they're receiving thousands of pieces of information that this man's dangerous, this man's doing this or planning that. And it's a case of, how do you find the wheat from the chaff, or the needle in the haystack? It's utterly scandalous that we have people in this country who are dangerous and we know nothing about.
Right. I mean, we've got people in this country from this country who are dangerous, but the problem is when you import a load of people, and when you look at statistics that other countries publish that we do not, related to particular crimes and immigration, you realise there is a positive correlation, that there is a trend. And yet we wait, don't we, for such statistics to be released to the public, if they're held at all. My suspicion is they probably are. And I want to sort of point now to another crime wave that's hitting the high street this time. 670 shoplifting offences going unsolved every day. Yes, there will be toe rags and ne'er-do-wells who go in there and nick a bottle of gin, or, you know. But what I have seen more and more of is gang-related shoplifting, so connected to criminal organisations. And I don't know if you know, can tell me more about this, but my understanding is you now have criminal gangs from the Balkans and Eastern Europe who come over. They will shoplift to order, not just from, you know, your supermarkets, but also even from restaurants, and raid their sort of, you know, their cellars and things. And they're taking luxury products, they're taking meats, they're taking alcoholic goods, putting them in vans and driving them back over to restaurants and businesses and, I don't know, gangster houses over in their own countries.
Absolutely. I mean, I was speaking to the head of one of the top 6 supermarkets who was saying that baby milk, for example, you'll have politicians saying people are stealing baby milk because their children are, you know, starving to death. Vietnam apparently is the destination of choice for mass amounts of stolen baby milk. Spirits, alcohol is stolen and then sold on to not just illicit clubs, but anybody who will buy it. You know, the idea it's a sort of old lady who's stealing a tin of tuna to stay, you know, stay off the hunger is simply not right. I mean, I've said this before. I dealt with a pub where it was quite a, you know, not the best pub in the world, but the menu was really quite nice. But just across the road was in London was an M&S petrol station, and so what was happening is, as you ordered the nice food, the landlord would task the drug addicts in the back to go and shoplift it. You know, so what ended up on your plate 20 minutes later had just been stolen to order. So it's incredible how much of this is going on. And what's happening is that the police have allowed it to happen, and these gangs have flourished. And one of the big things, Alex, if you steal and run out of the shop, the only thing that's left, there's no fingerprints or DNA, but all this is recorded on CCTV. Yeah. The police have a national database of DNA and fingerprints. They don't have a national database of images. So if you move around like these organised gangs and you steal in Warwickshire, Staffordshire, Birmingham, Liverpool, Manchester, if you leave your image behind, it will never be matched to the other images. So you simply, if you get caught, you get caught for one, you get a £2 fine and move on your way. And the police have not dealt with this, and the result is that people now feel entitled to steal.
I wonder where security guards come into this, because just thinking where I live in London, it's in the centre of London, it's on a very busy thoroughfare, and that thoroughfare is lined with, you know, shops, all the usuals, you know, your small Sainsbury's and your Co-op and all the rest of it, your M&S. And they've all got security guards, and they've all got the sort of things that go beep, 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 you know, if you take products out without scanning your receipt. And yet it's almost guaranteed if you go in there, someone's going to be making off with, you know, armfuls of produce. And security guards just seem unable to do anything. And I kind of think, what's the point?
Yeah, well, the security guard might, deter the old lady with a tin of tuna, but they won't deter an armed group of men who are determined to steal, who will use violence, because the security guard will be told, don't offer any violence, don't get hurt, because if you get hurt, you're not insured. So these poor guys are paid. It's not really the security guard's fault, or the shop employees. They've been told by their management, look, if you intervene and you get stabbed with a needle, or somebody grabs hold of you and hits you it stabs you with a knife, then you won't be insured. You're not trained for that. You just simply let them go. And this is the problem. The thieves know this, and these gangs, as you said, are very organised. They're very determined. They steal to order, and they're simply getting away with it. And we all pay, because for every item stolen, that those pennies and pounds go on to the top of the next thing that we want to buy.
Now, for my generation, I think probably the biggest Christmas film of all time was Home Alone. It was sort of defined our childhood, really, and this idea that you got this kid and the burglars are sniffing around the houses because people might have locked them up and gone on holiday for the festive period, or better still, they've got all these presents, they've got all of this stash, this swag that they might be able to get their hands on. Of course, now, in the modern era, roll that forward, and I'm pretty sure the two burglars in Home Alone would just be lifting people's Amazon parcels from their, hiding places outside houses. How much does this sort of crime go up during the festive period?
It goes up enormously, because there's more and more items available. People are sort of let them be left in garden sheds or in boxes, and thieves know this. But the real problem here is, Alex, is that the thieves know that the police won't do anything about it. And I've looked at, in the last 2 years, 28 of the 43 police forces in England and Wales have been inspected by Her Majesty's Inspector of Constabulary, the people who check with police are good enough. Now, of those 28, they're checked on very many things, but one of the most important, of course, is investigating crime. They're judged on how that force investigates offences. And of those 28, only one of them was good. One. There's another category, excellent. None of them were excellent. But of 16 of that 28, they were either inadequate or needs improving. And everybody else was adequate, which is never a good, I get a good idea of my mother if I came home with a school report saying I was adequate. So that is why it's not good enough. The police are focused elsewhere, so people stealing parcels from outside houses is not important. Perhaps if they accompanied with some awful words on Facebook, then something might be done about it. But it's just... The thieves are very clever, the thieves are determined, and the police don't seem to be determined to catch criminals at all.
Yeah, Sam, I mean, it seems to me there's been this huge softening. There's almost like an expectation now that these things have become totally normalised. When I was a kid growing up, if you went in and took a pack of Chewits and Merritts, you're in big trouble. You're being smacked across the wrist, marched back to the shop. Not that I ever did this, I was a good girl. But now, just shoplifting, you just see it everywhere. It's, oh, well, there we go. Oh, someone's been stabbed. And yet we do have a situation where the police are focusing on things that, frankly, are not crimes. Again, we were talking about the societal problems underneath things like healthcare and social care earlier. And I get the impression there's also a sort of societal problem now with it's the sort of the culture of low expectations of what we should tolerate in a society. And this whole idea of, well, a bit like Mike was saying, well, these aren't people who are taking food because the system's unjust and they need food banks. Why is it that we seem to have developed a mindset in this country that, oh, it's acceptable to steal? In fact, it's so normal, nothing's going to happen.
Well, I think there is a line that goes between people putting their feet on the chairs on trains and playing loud music even when it's obnoxious, and just not caring, just choosing to check out from basic societal standards and thinking that they can get away with it. And look, there is a culture of people in this country now, a subgroup, that feel like the normal rules don't apply, and why should they? Because time and time again, they can get away with it. It pays to be a complete and utter, prat, nasty piece of work. But there's also an effect of... In the old days, you knew who your local criminal was.
Exactly.
You knew exactly who he was. He would go down to the town centre, he'd sit around all day drinking, he'd go off and nick something, and when the police saw a little piece of CCTV, they went and saw Colin, because Colin had been thieving again, and Colin would get a night in the cells. Today, people don't know other people. We just don't know them.
And this isn't just in big cities. That was the case, and you'd always get sort of breakdown of community in big cities, more crime in big cities. Of course, I was just reading the paper this morning, and there's two guys, one from Iraq, one from Iran, who've been running people trafficking organisations out of a hand car wash in Kafili. And you just think, you look at the number of these Turkish barbers everywhere, 16 odd in a town like Devizes or something, and you think this is a huge part of the problem. Like you said, there used to be community, and with community comes this concept of shame and identifying people and ostracising people, whereas now it's all broken down. And I think it's another example of how mass immigration essentially is weakening our resolve, weakening integration, and all of these things, whether it's healthcare, whether it's crime, it all goes wrong. Mike Neville, thank you ever so much. Listen, what are your thoughts on all of this? Do let me know. 03444 99 1000 is the number to call. And don't you worry, no daylight robbery here, because those calls are charged at your normal rate, as are text messages. That's your standard rate too. And that can be achieved by typing the number 87222 into your phone. But you do need to write the word talk before your message if it's going to find its way here into the studio. You can also WhatsApp me on 03444 99 1000. And we're on X at talkTV, and we want to hear from you because it's your opportunity to throw in your 2 bits after this break.
I'm pretty relaxed about it. I mean, there are rules in place in terms of foreign donors, but if there's a UK company involved, then it's deemed appropriate that money can be donated to a political party. So clearly that's a decision for those people whose money it is. Personally, I think there are more important things in politics than money. I think the most important thing that people will make a decision on who they choose to vote for is the leadership qualities.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back. Well, shall we all share in some festive cheer together now? Let's begin that by speaking to Paul, who's in Devon. Hi, Paul.
Yes, good morning, Alex. How are you?
I'm all right, my darling. How is Devon?
Well, it's grey and grim down here. Obviously, not good news for the windmills and the solar panels. Unfortunately, we've got plastered all over the place. But just to talk to you about Mr. Starmer and his promises and what he's doing. Obviously, people say Keir Starmer's broken his promises. Well, basically, all he promised us was change, and that's what we're getting. If you look at what he's up to, in a sense that he is now changing the face of the House of Lords by stuffing it full of his cronies, which I think you'll find that this man is going to actually abolish the House of Lords. And what is he going to replace it with? Well, if we cast our minds back to the year of 2004 and a man named John Prescott, who tried to introduce regional assemblies into this country by amalgamating councils into big unitary authorities, what is Keir Starmer trying to do now? I think that when he says that he will not take us back to the European Union, he's quite correct in saying that. He's going to do it another way. He's going to bring back our regional assemblies, which obviously I think you will recall in 2006 the European Union wanted to break the United Kingdom up into 8 regions.
Yes.
And from that point, these regional assemblies will then be able to do their own deals with the EU. That is how we are going to go back to the European Union. Starmer won't be doing it. And if you think, this man has got our best interests at heart, he's not. He, in the new year, is going to be off on his foreign travels again, and this time you will find he's going to be off to Davos to take his instructions for 2025.
Yeah. Sam, I've got to bring you in on this. This is, again, a topic I wasn't expecting to talk about today, but here we go. Devolution. And they are, of course, talking about creating sort of more metro mayors and mayors of unitary authorities and creating these regions. And I remember, because I was involved in UKIP before Brexit Party and before being in the European Parliament myself, it is very much the blueprint of the EU to regionalise everywhere and create this downflow of power, this so-called democracy. And yet it isn't, is it? The problem is when you have this, what you end up with is layers and layers of bureaucracy where I think actually people feel less accountable. If it was me, frankly, I'd get rid of that blimmin' Welsh Assembly. I'd get rid of that nonsense up in Scotland that think, men can go in women's prisons. I'd get rid of that one in Northern Ireland that barely even sits half the time because they can't decide who should have power. It is a nonsense. It's glorified county council stuff. What was wrong with the old model? Devolution, in my mind, costs money. I don't think it actually helps democracy. I think it's the other way around. And Paul is onto something. This has been the left-wing agenda, the sort of global socialist agenda for a long time now.
But Alex, you're forgetting the fact that these bodies provide jobs for people in politics. They provide extra money swishing around the Labour Party. Politicians sitting on these bodies paid tens of thousands of pounds, good money, almost as much as MPs. What are they voting on? Pothole strategies. And it's not like they're even making the decisions themselves. No. They're approving these guidelines, these documents that sit above them, taking decisions further and further and further away from local people. Look, I think there is some scope for mayors that are empowered to run towns and cities properly, etc. You see them in the US, of course, genuinely local government, genuine authority.
Yeah.
But we don't have that in this country because they're all subject to rules and guidelines published nationally. And you ask councillors, you ask people that work in local government, have done it for a long time, and they'll say things like, we don't really run it. It's actually run by the officers, which is their term for civil servants. And that's the reality. They keep changing the label on it. They keep coming up with new things for politicians to do. We saw it with police and crime commissioners, famously. We thought, we're going to have US-style sheriffs. And then you ask a PCC, what can you do? Oh, nothing really. You see an appalling case like we saw in Essex with Alison Pearson, who was wrongly given this NCHI. And what do they do? It's very important we follow the guidelines. It's powerful people getting paid in order to tell you that they don't have any power.
It's like, without being too tinfoil hatty, it's a bit like the way they do things in China, which is everyone is only sort of one person away from the Chinese Communist Party if you're not in it yourself somehow, by virtue of having a job which is essentially for the government or connected to the government or commissioned by the government. And this is what alarms me about the direction of travel in the United Kingdom. We're going hell for leather for this stuff, and people are isn't it great? No, it's not. These people, like you said, cost a load of money. They're not manufacturing, they're not making things, they're not adding to the economy. Most of the time, haven't got anything to do. So they sit around and come up with diversity stuff or 20-mile-per-hour zones. It's just this layer of stagnant bureaucracy. It is the swamp, and the swamp just keeps getting bigger. Do you know, Paul, can I just say thank you for bringing this topic up, because it's been on my mind for quite a while now, and like it seems a bit weird to say, I want to go anti-devolution. That's what people had this debate in fringes, let's say, in Wales about 20 odd years ago, and everyone's gone, oh well, we got the Welsh Assembly, that's that then. But like I said, I kind of think this stuff should be brought back to the table, because if we don't address this, the Labour Party in 5 years' time are going to mechanically, architecturally change the shape of how Britain is governed.
Yeah, and look, this isn't in people's interest. The new proposal is to turn basically all of the southern counties into a place under a mayor. There is no time in human history that's happened. Like, the idea that the priorities of people in Thanet in East Kent are exactly the same as those in West Kent are mad, right? We used to organise people around communities, towns that people actually live in. Leftists hate that. They hate natural organisations of different places in different sizes with a hodgepodge. They want to homogenise everything. They want to make everybody just sitting in under one council place, one efficient leader, and then they want to tell that leader, whose job is basically to pretend to the local people that they're in charge, exactly what it is that they're going to be doing for the next 10, 15 years. And when they don't do it, one of their lefty lawyer mates will judicially review the council and say, oh no, when you said you wanted to build this new road that would cut driving times by half an hour, actually you didn't properly consider the impact on Greater Crested Newts.
Honestly, it's a hell in a handcart, this strategy. Paul, thank you ever so much. Let's just quickly squeeze in Steve, who's in Bristol. Hi, Steve. How are you doing there?
Hello, Alex. Brilliant job, but lovely show. All I want to get back to is these young kids that hang around shops and burglars and that. I blame the parents, a lot of them.
Yeah.
None of them says thank you. There's no manners. They're rude. And I'll tell you another thing, Alex. If I caught anybody in my house, you take your chances. Simple as that. Where I come from in Bristol, if you didn't behave yourself, you just got filled in by your mother. And you accepted it. None of this wokey. Well, I was going to swear there, but I won't embarrass you. But you know what I'm saying? There's no please, there's no thank you, and there's no respect.
I'm totally with you, Steve. And you know what? Especially when it comes to some of the more extreme crimes, when you've got these little tearaway kids, or just putting it mildly, these monsters, these junior gangsters in their face masks and their hoodies going around on bikes, stealing phones, carrying knives. The police should be they should be going to the parents' house. They should be hauled down to the cop shop. They should face charges, because if you're under the age of 18, you are the responsibility of your parents. And I think it's about time we started getting strict on parents, because far too many don't know where their kids are. They don't know what their kids are doing. They don't care if they're in school, or if they're truanting, or stealing, or stabbing, or making drill music. And it's got to stop. Steve, I think you're absolutely right. Gert Lush, I would say, as a fellow West Country girl. Thank you, my babber. Brilliant point. OK, let's take a short break now. But when I come back, we're going to be talking about all things money, because I'm joined by Georgie Foss, the Times Money Mentors editor at large. That was a bit of a mouthful to say. I don't know why, but we're going to see if we can answer all of your festive, fiscal and financial questions after this.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
Hello there, welcome back. Now, probably spent a bob or two, haven't you, this Christmas, haven't we all? Although I kind of feel like it's not as festive as it normally is, and I wonder what that has got to do with the cost of living crisis. Probably quite a lot. We're joined now by Georgie Foster, Times Money Mentors editor at large, but in here in the studio with me. Fantastic. Let's first of all start off with the news out today that all of that growth that we were promised in the snap election, well, it's not happening. In fact, there's probably a bit of a risk that 2025 could see us going in the other direction.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, we knew it wasn't particularly good anyway. Growth was looking anemic, I think is the word, and now figures have been revised by the ONS to show that actually it looks like we have had no growth at all. The standards of living also have sort of flatlined as well, and going into 2025 it looks likely that we could enter recession, which is of course 2 quarters of falling growth, the economy stagnating. So, I mean, look, like I said to you, what's the difference between 0.1% growth and 0 and minus 0.1%? Not a huge amount, but it just doesn't look like a very rosy picture for Labour, who came in and promised us a little bit more than that. Plus, of course, we had the budget. And we've got the CBI saying that businesses are feeling the worst, the most pessimistic they have since the Liz Truss disastrous... We can't even call it a mini-budget. It wasn't a budget.
Where do you point the finger of blame at all of this? Because the Labour Party say, well, look, we've inherited a nightmare. We didn't know how bad things were until we came into power. We've had to make some difficult decisions to patch up big problems, but we don't want to be judged by where we're at right now. Judge us in 5 years' time. Is that a cop-out? Is it fair that they say, well, look, you know, actually investing in infrastructure is vital for growth? Or, you know, are their tax decisions, frankly, foolish, feckless, reckless?
It's a really hard question to answer as to who's to blame. You certainly can't say that the Labour government, who've only been in for about 6 months, are to blame for low growth in this country. Productivity, low growth has been something that we've been fighting with for many, many years. However, there have certainly been things that have happened since Labour came in. The budget, a lot of the decisions that I think will not help the situation. For example, increasing national insurance for businesses will put businesses in quite a difficult situation, particularly those businesses that rely on a lot of staff, services sector, for example, and they're already having huge costs. We've come out the back of, you know, cost of living crisis, which has impacted, you know, all of us, businesses included. It feels like, and this goes to what you're saying there, look, while I have sympathy for Labour coming in, you're looking at me like, no.
No.
In the fact that it's, you know, they haven't had long. To say judges in 5 years' time, people are fed up. We are looking around us, we are seeing holes in the road, we are waiting in queues at, you know, hospitals, etc. Things aren't working. And so to say in another 5 years is not good enough, really. And I think for businesses particularly, if we want to increase growth, you cannot point to many measures that are happening at the moment that would stimulate that growth that's needed to get us back to where we should be for us to start feeling a little bit better.
I mean, but one could say, though, when you look at those things, the holes in the road and, you know, crumbling infrastructure, that the money's got to come from somewhere. And so they've just said, OK, we're just going to do a raid right now. We're going to get that money out now. We're going to fix those things right now.
Yeah. Money has to come from somewhere. There's no... That's obvious. The problem with economics is when you make decisions, or finances, when you make decisions, there are knock-on impacts elsewhere. So, for example, you think, OK, we're going to just take a bit of extra national insurance from businesses. We've got 29 billion extra to spend. OK. However, what are those businesses going to do? They're going to stop spending. They're going to stop paying people money for example. They're going to stop giving people pay rises. There is a knock-on impact that will have a far wider impact on the economy that we can't even know yet. But the experts, the Bank of England, the CBI, the businesses that have been polled in the CBI research, which are really pessimistic about it, say that some of these decisions, so the minimum wage, net zero targets, which you were talking about earlier, all these extra costs on businesses are going to have a big impact on growth, a big impact on whether people are going to have pay rises, whether they're going to hire people. So then we're going to have a situation with more unemployed people. Where are you going to get the extra benefits that are needed for that? It's something that needs to be looked at holistically, and I feel that this is a bit too disjointed on what is happening at the moment with some of the government decisions. They've come in very quickly. They said we've got problems, we need to face those problems. I would question the speed of some of that. Some of the decisions made in the budget, and this is my personal opinion, were just a little bit soon, a little bit quick, and maybe they should have taken some time just to see how the lay of the land was first, before we start having... because they've managed to really upset quite a lot of people.
The big ticket items of
businesses,
GB
entrepreneurs,
energy,
farmers, all sorts of people have been very disappointed by this, and I think that there is going to be knock-on impacts of every decision that they're making, and a lot of the decisions they're making, for example, the winter fuel allowance, will not bring in as much money as they suggest. So they're talking about net zero targets, for example, this packaging tax, which is supposed to increase our groceries by about £56. We can talk about that in a second. But it's things like that that are just going to add more and more pressure onto people at a time, and they can't afford it.
Talk to us now about the packaging tax. I mean, it's not going to be a huge amount of money added. Some people say this is sort of petty-fogging around the edges. Other people might say, well, what's wrong with just having, like you go into your normal grocery store, your greengrocers, and you've got vegetables on display. Why when you buy, like, 4 pairs, like I did the other day, does it come in a sort of, little styrofoam moulded tray with, plastic over it with... if they were UK pairs, like, what's going on here? I'm kind of almost for this policy, can I
look, there are benefits to this as well. Okay,
God forbid.
So this to give an explanation. So this was an idea first thought up by Michael Gove. Back in the day when I think he was head of DEFRA, they said that they would bring in a packaging charge for businesses, so it would be premised on the sort of packaging you use. So you create plastic, you pay more money for that, less money for paper, etc. But basically councils are paying for the cost of recycling and picking up rubbish, etc., etc. So this would take that away and a charge would be levied on businesses. OK, now whether you agree with net zero policies or not, whether you agree with man-made climate change or whatever, I think we can all agree that there's a lot of packaging and it's messing the streets, etc. So having something that makes businesses look at, how much packaging they're using, whether we can recycle some of this is a good thing. The problem is this policy was shelved by Rishi Sunak last year because it was just too expensive for the consumer. So that £56 is an estimate, the highest estimate, so sort of 28 to 56 extra we put on, because where, of course, are these extra costs going to come from? Well, businesses are going to have to put up prices. They're talking about putting up prices anyway because of, as we said, the national insurance rate rise, the minimum wage, etc. So they're talking about that anyway. So it's going to be borne by us at a time when we've just come through a horrendous cost of living crisis. Food is like 25% more expensive now than it was before COVID. This is a lot more money that we're paying that people can't afford. However, Labour is saying that money will go into recycling investment, it will go into jobs, etc. Let's hope that's the case. Let's hope this comes out. But again, it's something that it's coming in January the 1st. I think it will start hitting businesses around August time. Again, there's a lot of costs at the moment that are going to really impact. And this is one of those areas, again, where, for example, you asked the question about pears. Apparently, there's some statistic that a cucumber in plastic lasts about 10 days longer than if it was just kept out in the open. So there's going to be extra food waste if it's not packaged properly. So
how long does it take to eat a cucumber? I could get through one of those in 3 days.
I just leave them in my fridge for months.
Do they go that sort of like wet, that green slime? You pick up the plastic package and there's no structural integrity.
It's like one of those things. And actually, something like 2/3 of salads in those bags, while they may last longer, don't get used. They get chucked away.
Look, I love that we're going down a sort of random tangent here. I love a random tangent.
I'm all for the random
if you will. I go to a farmer's market. I love that blooming farmer's market. And everything's British. You can't even, it's in London, you can't even sell anything there. So you can't get avocados or anything there, unless it's grown in Britain. Even when people come over, there's a little French place that makes crepes. Okay, so it's a crepe, but every single ingredient has to be from British farmers. So you go there, and I have my sort of big Hessian sack, and I pick my own fruits and put it in the sack. They don't even put them in bags. They weigh them then and there. And I find when I buy salad, which is grown in Pershore near Evesham from this farmer's market, it lasts about 1,000 years. The supermarket stuff goes brown at the edges and has that dubious wet on it within seconds. And I just wish people could be re-educated in home economics. I'll buy something, I'll do my little weekly shop. It costs a lot more because it's in the farmer's market. But you buy less, you use it all. It's far better, helps the farmers. No plastic packaging. I've got a halo around my head in time for Christmas. Why can't people just do that?
And you don't have soggy cucumbers in the bottom of your fridge. Nothing worse.
Cucumbers.
But, you know, you think about all these, as you said, the importing and coming over. Yes, there's the climate issue as well, but also there's time. The time that you don't have to spend when you go to the farmer's market, because they're picking that fresh. So that's why it stays fresher for longer, because it hasn't gone all the way on the flight or wherever it goes, all the way over here. Yeah. I don't know how you get tomatoes over from Spain, but I'm sure it's some sort of way that is takes a long time. So, yes, being more mindful about the way that we shop is certainly, and I do think, look, there are measures. I go into a supermarket now and I don't see many of those packages. Remember, they used to package everything.
Tell you what, shouldn't name names, but M&S, you can't buy anything without it being sort of mummified in some sort of vinyl. It's like, honestly, the whole lot of it is just like, you know, you want to buy an apple, oh, you know, 5 years later, you've unwrapped it like it's Christmas every day. Georgie, thank you ever so much. It's been why is this the first time you've come on my show?
I don't know.
I enjoyed that chit-chat.
Thank you very much.
Right, more of this in 2025, please. OK, now, tell me how you buy your food. No, you don't have to. You can talk about whatever you like, because after the break, it's your opportunity to get in touch. 03444 99 1000 is the number to call. Standard network rate and all the rest of it. You can use that on WhatsApp to leave me a voice note even. I haven't played any of those yet. Let's get some of those out if we can. If they're clean, keep them decent. 8722 is the number for text message. Put the word talk before your text, and we're on X at talkTV. I'm back just after this.
I mean, it's Christ almighty. I mean, our economy is the fastest growing economy in the world's, in the G7, which is the world's biggest economies. And that was the first 6 months of the year. Since when the Labour, all the gloom and doom, if you heard it again there from Lucy Powell, all the gloom and doom, and then massive tax increases and massive more public spending, £70 billion of increase in public spending, £40 billion of which are tax increases.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back. I'm just going to read you a little story that's been dropped on my desk by the glamorous Alicia, who's running the show today. Yeah, I might be the one sitting here gurning into a camera, but the evil glare of Alicia is peering through the glass. So just as I say that, my usual head honcho, Ted's appeared. I'm in trouble now. He's got a Christmas jumper on, so he doesn't look as scary as normal. Anyway, Alicia has just dropped this on my desk. Kemi Badenoch has turned around and said Elon Musk would be trying to buy UK politics with a donation to Reform. Oh, what a surprise. So who was buying the politics of all the donations to the Conservative Party, eh? Oh, that's right. You just stood on a street corner, didn't you, shaking a little tin, going, oh, please, could you give some money? You just got all those millions in your bank account with Christmas raffles and, I don't know, opportunities to go for tea at the Ritz with Boris Johnson or something. I mean, Sam, what do you think of this? Because that's how politics works, isn't it? You either have no donations to political parties or people who donate to political parties want influence. I'd imagine most political parties, particularly the Conservative Party, have received donations from multinational companies. Elon Musk is the head of a multinational company. He wants influence. He's going to give money to the people that he wants to be in government. That's the name of the game.
Well, look, here's what I think. Kemi Badenoch is the leader of the opposition. She's attempting to take the fight to this Labour government, and what a government she's got to go up against. And this is her big pre-Christmas interview. It's a big moment to shape the narrative. People are listening. Who is she responding to? What is she talking about? What are we all talking about today about? Her battle to own the right, her battle against Nigel Farage. This just undermines to me that Kemi Badenoch has got to, in order to be Prime Minister of this country, get Reform voters to vote en masse for Conservative. And I think they are now, frankly, Reform voters, not Conservative voters. 4 million of them. Another couple of million of Tory voters stayed at home. And that is the big battle she's going up against. And so far, the polls show Nigel Farage is not only winning Reform voters at the last election, frankly, there's a few Conservative voters at the last election going over to him. And for as long as that happens, Kemi Badenoch can make all the promises that she would like. She can talk about how she's going to build this great plan for government. It ain't going to happen.
Well, she's not making any promises. This is the other difficulty she's got. When people say, what do you want to do? I was listening to her this morning on the BBC. Sorry, David Paul, I actually tuned into today's programme. But I wanted to listen to that interview. And you know, she used the analogy of, oh, it's like saying I'm going to build a restaurant in 4 years' time, so what's going to be on the menu? I'm not going to tell you yet. And she thought she made this really smart analogy saying, well, look, when we open, that's when you'll be able to see the menu. I'm like, you're not opening the restaurant, you're a blimmin' politician. The whole purpose of you existing is to have political ideology, which means policies. I'm afraid, love, you can't wait 4 years. You're leader of the opposition right now. That begins here and now. People need to know what Badenochism is. I don't think it's working for her. I have such high hopes.
Well, look, Kemi says she likes a steak for her lunch, but in the meantime, Nigel Farage is offering real red meat to Conservative voters, and they are liking what they're buying. Nigel Farage's popularity ratings have gone up since the election. For the first time, he's managed to get the number of people in this country that dislike him under 50%. It's quite difficult to come in as an outsider and do that. He's managed to do that. All that points towards is that Nigel Farage isn't going anywhere. And here's the thing. Labour got office with 34% of the vote. There are 45% of people that will vote Conservative and Reform. If that number is split in any way evenly, if that number is split such that the Conservatives are only at 30%, say, Keir Starmer will be walking back into office with a majority. Even if it's pushed a little bit more for the Conservative Party, he'll be walking in with a minority government. And for as long as that happens, as long as that carries on, we will be looking at Keir Starmer with all of the damage he's doing to his economy indefinitely. I don't know what is going to be the solution.
The face of Keir Starmer will be unravelled on a red backdrop in front of Buckingham Palace, won't it?
I don't know what the solution is, but right now, as you say, the polls suggest it's just not working.
Ain't working. Let's have a little chat now, shall we, to Mark, who's in Lincolnshire. Hi, Mark.
Hi there, Alex. You all right, Doc?
Yeah, what's on your mind, my love?
Yeah, it was just your previous caller there before who opened up a bit of a conversation on devolution.
Oh, yeah. I'm liking the random devolution tangent we're going down.
Yeah, it's something that's been concerning me quite a bit because I've had a little bit of a look into it, and in particular reference to what it would mean for me in this area, for people that live here in lovely little Boston in Lincolnshire. And, well, not so lovely really. But anyway, we're a population of around about 100,000 here, which means we fall well under the threshold that Labour are talking about for this 500,000 super authorities that they're quoting. Yeah. So basically, right off the bat, the way I'm looking at this, from everything I've read about this, it seems to be that I will jump from voting in 2 elections to voting in about 4 elections. Because what I'm going to be ending up doing, the way that this seems to be structured, is I'll not only vote in a general election, as everybody does, not only will I vote in a local borough council election, because that's what will still remain here, it'll just be a lot smaller, but it'll still be something I vote for. I will also vote on a super authority, which will probably end up being, I would imagine, either most of or all of Lincolnshire. So I'll vote in that as well. And then I'll vote in a mayoral election, apparently. So that's 4 elections all of a sudden. So the way I see this, voter apathy will go through the roof. It's going to be a bureaucratic nightmare because nobody's going to take responsibility. You think that's bad now, it's going to be even worse once you have all these extra bodies in place, which I think is one of the reasons they've done this. To me, it just sounds a lot like communism.
Yeah.
They're going to basically, and essentially the way that all this stuff works, the people that are working local on the ground that you will vote for will actually have very, very little power. And most of it will be done by the super authority, the unitary authority for the area. They will do a lot of it, but they can be overridden at any time or be forced to do certain policies on the say-so of the mayor, who has ultimate power. So really...
But if the mayor then, so we're going to play devil's advocate here, because I'm not up for bureaucracy. I just think we've already got, if someone's out there, by the way, who can do a bit of research for me, because I always think you guys out there listening, watching, are my unseen production team, and when I ask a question, I'm always amazed at how many replies I get doing the dirty work for me. I believe we have sort of per capita the highest, one of the highest headcounts of politicians already in the world when you look at the House of Commons and the House of Lords. I wonder what that is if you start adding super authorities to county councils and throwing in some extra mayors and stuff like that. It does seem to me that we're going to end up with more politicians than voters, which I just can't see how enables the state at all, unless of course these politicians are all doing voluntary jobs and they're people who live in the real world and so they don't cost anything and might know a thing or two about to do the job of running the country. But I was going to say, Mark, I'm going to play devil's advocate here. Were the mayor of the super authority someone with the right colour rosette that appeals to your particular inclination politically, would that make it better? Would that then suddenly be a positive? Because you'd think, OK, I've now got a layer of protection, let's say. I've got a, X mayor here, and it's a white government, so at least the worst of what the white government might do that I don't like might not necessarily impact me, and we can have a little cocoon of common sense here with our own little, you know, special mayor who thinks the right way. Could there be benefits?
No, I don't think. That wouldn't bother me at all. I don't really care who the mayor is, what colour rosette he wears, or she. The point is, the mayor has overall control, but the mayor reports directly and basically works on the assumption of power that comes directly from the Prime Minister and the Deputy Prime Minister. In other words, whatever the Prime Minister and Deputy Prime Minister, it's ultimately going to matter who they are above the mayor. It's kind of irrelevant to me what colour rosette the mayor's wearing, because all I see with this is just more levels of bureaucracy, because it's hard enough. We've all dealt with our local councils as is, and it's a nightmare. It's a literal nightmare. We all know this. None of this is going to make that any easier whatsoever. It's just going to add more layers to it.
Yeah, I don't see where we're going to get prosperity from this. It's just going to be more noses in the trough as far as I can tell. But, you know, let's see how it all pans out. Mark in Lincolnshire, thank you ever so much. Let's speak now to Andrew, who is in Hertfordshire. Andrew, what is your particular topic you want to be chewing over?
Well, first and foremost, my first topic is to wish you a happy Christmas, a great new year, and let 2025 be a great year for you and Talk Radio.
Oh, thank you. And a huge thanks for me and all the people I work with who are brilliant.
So to go back to the focus, you had a guest on there and you have your gentleman in the studio. They used some expressions earlier that were wrong.
Right.
Security guards and people that are in shops, they don't use violence when they're dealing with shoplifters.
Right.
They're using reasonable force. The person using the violence
is the offender. Do you know, I've made a big mistake. I've actually run out of time. I've got to go to an advert break. I'm going to have to cut you off. That was extremely shabby of me. Sorry about that. Well, I'm going to be back after this for one more hour and I'll try and do better.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Hello there, welcome back. Someone, can I just say, so it's a bit early. My birthday is on Boxing Day, but Nicholas, not my Nicholas, my other half's called Nicholas, someone sent me this amazing birthday card. Look at, I don't know if you can see that if you're watching. It's sort of like birds, and it's like, I don't know, what would you call that effect? 3D.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
It's cool, isn't
mesmerising.
it? Yeah, thanks for that. Nicholas, thank you. That's amazing. That's going to have pride of place. It's going to really trip out my cat. And I'm pleased to say, having cut him off unceremoniously for adverts earlier, let's welcome back Andrew, who's in Hertfordshire. Woo! Sorry about that, Andrew. I'm all Christmassy, and Sam's half dead in the corner. Everyone's basically checked out already, looking forward to mince pies and a tipple. And I just got my timing so dreadfully wrong. I hope you would forgive me for my rudeness there. We were talking before the break about security guards not being able to use any sort of force.
Yeah, and that's very kind of you. And I never saw you as a person that owned cats, I must say. Now,
do you think I was a dog person?
Yeah, I thought you'd have been a dog person from the West
come
Country.
off it. No, I'm, like sort of evil, aren't I? Like, Blofeld or something.
Now, look, the reality of that whole thing was, the breakdown of society and why we're allowing it. So first and foremost, if you had, heaven forbid, an incident occur in the studio now and you needed a police officer and they were 10 miles away at 70 miles an hour in a straight line, it would take them 10 minutes to get there. And what's happened is when people look at TikTok and other social media, they've seen that they can do something and it takes so long for the police to get there. We have never had enough police. The police officers that you use on your program are good, but they lack depth because they don't understand the true reality. Police in the 1950s, after the Second World War, they had to work what was called ARDs, additional rest days, to make it work. We've never had enough. London is tricked into this whole 30,000 police officers. No, it's not enough. And the mayor of New York was very good. He realised that litter and broken windows, once people's mentality is, and where you live in the nice country, you watch how it changes as you drive through towards the west. When you get to the country, there's no litter because people care about it. And that's the root cause of it, is the ability for people to start to hate where they live. Once you've got that, and then young people know if we go in mob-handed to Marks and Spencer's and we take a load of items, there is no way, and the most policemen that could turn up, think about it logically, is 2 or 4. So if there's 12 of you, what's your percentile chance of being caught? Less than 5%. So that's where it breaks down. And the only way forward, and Nigel Farage will get on top of this, is what you do is you cut the budget for foreign aid, and you take every one of those civil servants, not so much the money, the civil servants, which probably would be about 40 to 50,000, and you say, you've got no job, or you join the police to keep your pension, your civil service pension.
Civil service in the police, pen pushers out on the streets? Or you mean they'd be at the desks doing the processing and the real police would be on the streets?
Yeah, but remember, what we need is heads to do those roles. So that's the key thing now. You need a step change, and that's where Nigel Farage, all he has to do is give elderly pensioners £2,000 a year for fuel, bring back the death penalty, and stop immigration and pump gas, and he's in.
Well, there you go. Andrew in Hertfordshire, I think we know who he's going to be voting for. It's funny, people are sort of already talking about Nigel, like that's it. He's already sworn in as the next Prime Minister. But, listening to what Andrew was saying, it put me in mind of something that the Labour Party have announced. And I can't remember what the policy was called, but it essentially is. It's almost like the Labour Party's version of an ASBO. Do you remember what I'm... Do you know
Respect orders.
Respect orders, that's it. I mean, it sounds a bit on whatever, but this is kind of what we're talking about, the sort of broken windows policy. You spoke about putting feet on train seats. Maybe we should let them roll it out, give them a chance. It could actually have a positive impact.
Well, yes, if they're prepared to go after the people that many people will know in their own communities. And look, there is an extent to which people are travelling around a bit more and you don't know who it is in quite the right way. But The only way you tackle crime is by sweating over the small stuff. It's like fixing any organisation. You have to sweat the small stuff. We know broken windows policing works. If you deal with the people that are smashing up windows or breaking into cars or painting graffiti, you will build a culture in which people respect the laws, respect the norms, respect each other a little more. I would be surprised if the Labour Party gave us that kind of culture. I think they're often quite permissive. I think many of them look at criminals and think they're victims
Well, you kind
themselves.
of wonder whose respect are they going to be demanding, and that's where it comes down to, the two-tierism again. I was kind of alarmed that Andrew thought I would have been a dog person. Are you a cat or a dog person?
A dog person. A cat is an inherently left-wing pet.
Why is a cat an inherently left-wing pet?
They don't understand the loyalties, the bonds, the connections that we fuse. The dog is
That's why I think cats are independent. They're not pack animals. They're not like, dogs are like communists. Cats are like little dictators.
I don't know, but I reckon if you were to look at a poll of cat versus dog owners, the right would be overrepresented amongst dogs, and the left amongst cats. It's like so J.D. Vance said, crazy Kamala Harris was a crazy cat lady.
Don't compare me to her. Listen, if someone can find that evidence of whether the right or the left have more cats or dogs, it's another thing I want you to try and find out for me. That'd be really interesting. I have a feeling it's the opposite. I have a feeling right-wingers have cats because, they're non-needy. And cats are never going to need you. They will, whereas I think needy people like dogs. Needy people.
We're going to have to resolve this before the show ends.
We've got to resolve this. Actually, do you know what? Let's start gathering our data. We like data-driven stuff on this show. We like evidence. We like the truth. So the first question I'm going to ask to former Conservative Special Advisor Charlie Rowley is just that. Are you a cat or a dog person?
Well, good afternoon, Alex. Good afternoon, Sam. I've got 2 cats at home, at the family home.
There you go. Cats.
But there is a but, I'm afraid. I am in the market this year, I think, to get a small dog. A small dog, not a big one.
What's the point of a small one? What do they do? Working dogs are awesome, like, German Shepherds and Labradors and stuff. They're cool. They do stuff. What do small ones do?
Well, I think because I live in a small flat, one bed flat, so I don't think it'd be adequate enough to have a bigger dog because they can't sort of roam around so much. And I think a smaller dog is obviously it's bigger for them, and more probably as a first dog, I think probably more manageable. I think, I don't know.
See, anyway, I think cats reflect a sort of small state mentality. I always say to my other half, who he was always a dog person, and now he's sort of with me and has therefore had to adopt a cat essentially along with me. It's 2 for the price of 1. He's starting to see the value of a cat because my cat's like, here you go, here's your food, windows open, see you later, love. Complete independence. She's brilliant, and I always say the return on investment on a cat's amazing. She's always there being comedic, but she barely asks for anything. I can go away for a couple of days, the neighbours will go around, put her food down. She's as happy as Larry. Whereas dogs, it's like constant management. Got to take it for a walk. It's just, I like small states, me.
It's a huge
agency.
It's a huge. Yeah, absolutely. It's a huge responsibility, I think, a dog more than a cat. And cats are loyal. There is loyalty there as well. I know. And they're intelligent as well as
they're very clever. People
independent.
underestimate the loyalty of a cat. When you think that, you leave a window open, but the cat always comes back to you every single day. They really love cats. And I am a mad cat woman. Right, now we've settled that you've let us down, although I'm still putting it at 50-50 because 2 cats at home getting a dog over here, cat here, among the right-wingers. Of course, I am far right in this context, by the way. But among the right-wingers, it's 50-50. But let's see if we can tip that balance in the favour of the pussycat. Now, economic statistics out today. They're hardly looking good, are they? I think we were to expect it, and Sam rightfully pointing out, actually, that this isn't even the effects of the budget. This is the effects of the, doom-mongering ahead of the budget. We haven't even seen the effects of the budget yet.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. It's confidence in the markets, and confidence is key, as we know too well. And so, look, when you say to people for months on end, for example, that you're not going to put up income tax, national insurance on VAT, and then put up national insurance contributions on business. It's a tax on business. It's a tax on employers. It is obviously, as business tells you, I mean, this isn't, difficult stuff. It's the blindingly obvious that you put up a tax like that, you're going to cut off growth, you're going to choke off the growth, you're going to prevent businesses growing to employ new people. They're going to lay people off. They're not going to invest. And therefore, you grind the economy to a halt. And the idea that actually growth was predicted, I think it was about 0.3% to now to grow at 0.0%, that is zero, I think is obviously not a very happy message for the new year ahead.
Not happy at all. Now, what do you make of the idea that one thing that the new year is going to bring in is the inclusion of a bill about potentially giving 16 and 17-year-olds the right to vote? Do you look at that as, would you call it gerrymandering, or is that just fiddling around with boundaries? But would you call that sort of political engineering? Or do you think actually that's a good thing?
I am still fixed to the idea that I think, 18 is the right age. I think it's just, the more norms of becoming an adult around surrounds itself at 18. And I say that with the view that, potentially in the past we view that young people might be sort of more idealistic. They might be more left-wing in terms of what they want to see in the world and how wonderful we can be and how much money we can spend to make all the ills and ways of our countries and around the world disappear. But I say that still, even though that they're even acknowledging that there is a huge groundswell towards young people getting behind Nigel Farage. I think he's got over 1 million people on TikTok, whatever that is. And so, even with that in mind, and someone that is obviously of the centre right and of that kind of politics, I still maintain 18 is probably, I think, the best age. I know you can do things at 16. I know you have responsibilities, but I just think in law, the majority.
I agree with what you say, actually. A lot of young people, now the kids are alt-right, a lot of young people are actually, if you want, you put this policy in place at your peril, Sir Keir Starmer, because there's 5 years until the next general election. And what he may indeed find is a lot of the youngsters coming up do not share his politics as much as he might like to think that they do. But I just think more young people today have fewer responsibilities. People seem to stay in baby mode for longer. They're still living with their parents at the age of 25. They ain't in the real world paying taxes. People aren't getting married ever, let alone before the age of 30. They don't have mortgages. I kind of feel like that sort of the civic duties that come with full adulthood aren't even really kicking in yet until people are in their mid-20s. Perhaps we should be putting the voting age up. Talk to me now about, let's do this story, that teachers need to have the right to work from home. That's according to the Education Secretary. One would argue when it comes to doing marking and such like, surely they're working from home anyway, but when it comes to being active and having discipline in the corridors and conducting lessons, they need to be in schools.
Absolutely, and it's just another story on the back of the idea that councils and council staff can have sort of a 4-day week for the same salary as a 5-day week. When you need services, you should be able to call up your local authority and get the service that you as a hardworking person is paying your council tax for, just as a parent or even as a pupil. You deserve the service that your taxes are going to, which is a good education. And the idea that teachers, at a time where kids have missed out on school, where we're still playing catch up from COVID, if you're a business, for example, you don't just say, because if there's been a lack of productivity, because you've been hit in a particular way in terms of the markets or whatever, just a business way of the world, you don't suddenly then take your foot off the gas and say, oh, you know what I'm going to do? I'm actually going to work less hours and maybe have some more flexi time. You will double down and you will redouble your efforts to grow your company to be more competitive again. And that's exactly what should be happening, I think, in our school sector, where kids have lost out on that vital education because of COVID.
It's also sort of assuming that teachers are these sorts of automatons who just get given a bit of paper and they mark it by rote. When I was at school, the teachers would be sitting in the classroom at lunchtime doing the marking, and if you sort of ran past the door, screaming and shouting, making hullabaloo and looking like a ghost with your shirt flapping around everywhere, there'd be a very strong, "Oi! coming out of the classroom, and all of a sudden you'd sort of, pull your back up straight and tuck your shirt in and, pretend you were a discipline-abiding pupil once more. And I think this idea of hollowing out schools by saying, once you've done your lesson, you can go home. If we've got a discipline problem already in our schools, it's just going to get worse. I don't really understand this at all. But the Labour Party seem obsessed with going after working from home policies, as if they haven't crashed the economy enough. Now, let's talk to you about this one. Apparently, the WASPy women are joining Reform in their droves after being betrayed by Sir Keir Starmer. There's been a survey of 11,000 of these women who are affected by state pension increase, and it shows that 24% now support Nigel Farage. 82% say that Labour does not care about them. Well, that is clearly true. Only 13% say they would back the Tories. Is this a problem? Is this sort of indicative of what's happening in politics in general at the moment? Do you think it's going to stabilise out? When people are saying we hate the Labour Party, they're not ready to go back to the Tories, are they?
You're absolutely right, and it's about trust. And every political party has to build trust with the British people. The Tories lost that trust significantly at the last general election because it didn't deliver what it said it was going to do, particularly on cutting migration and taxes, and and obviously the political sort of chopping and changing of leader didn't help, I don't think. But broadly, the Conservative Party said it was going to do a lot of things that it didn't do, that it didn't deliver, and the country voted, not in its huge proportions, because a lot of people stayed at home. That's how they voted, with their feet, by staying at home. But a lot of people voted for change, and the alternative was the Labour Party. I don't think anybody endorsed or was, rushing out of the door to vote for, charismatic, Keir Starmer. But now that the Labour Party built their whole campaign over the last 5 years in opposition to, obviously, yes, attack the Tories, that's what you do in opposition, but making all of these promises, including an absolute commitment to delivering financial compensation to the WASPy women, being in any photo opportunity going, it seems to me, to pose with the WASPy women, to then have to work out the reality of the situation is that actually an ombudsman has done a report, they've concluded, and the government's going to implement that, and that's not what the WASPy women want to hear. That trust has been totally broken, and so it's no surprise at all when the trust has been broken with the Conservative Party and the British public earlier this year, that people have moved to the Labour Party and now think that the trust is broken with Sir Keir Starmer, not just because of the WASPy pension issue, but winter fuel allowance, the attack on farmers, choking off the economy. There's no surprise that people are looking for an opposition and an alternative, and that's why WASPy women, and I'm sure many others, are looking at reform quite seriously.
That's why he wants the 16 and 17-year-olds. But like I say, good luck there. Sam, your thoughts on all this? I mean, look, it's funny, isn't it? Reform don't really need to be doing a great deal at the moment to be on everyone's lips. They don't really... I mean, Kemi Badenoch's attack on them was they just say easy lines. They don't have to deliver anything. They don't know the truth of the situation. They're getting away with it, essentially. But it's almost inevitable, isn't it? Like Charlie was saying there, I don't think people really did vote for Sir Keir Starmer. Fewer people voted Labour this time round than last time round, and yet they got this whopping majority. People just voted against the Tories.
Undoubtedly, that was true. And you might think one way of looking at it is that in order to regain people's trust, that one thing Kemi Badenoch could be doing would be to be incredibly busy going out, nailing her colours to the mast, saying this is what we believe, this is what we would do, Keir Starmer's doing this, here's how we would do it differently. She's taking a different approach. She's choosing to try and do, I think it'd be fair to call the Starmer strategy, wait for them to muck it up and then come in the waiting wings. Your challenge for her is that Nigel Farage is coming along and he is doing the work. I mean, actually, we say Nigel doesn't need all reform, doesn't need to do very much. Actually, I've never seen Nigel Farage work as hard as he's working right now. I've been following this guy for 10 years. 10 years ago, I got my first job in politics working for the Conservative Party's anti-UKIP unit.
You didn't?
I did.
When was that?
2014. Got
Hey,
that
that was when I was the head of media. You little snitch, and now you sit in the studio with
busy.
me. You blimmin' did, I remember.
But back then, I mean, frankly, Nigel was not working at the same pace, the same skill, the same charisma, the same volume he's working now. You go now to lunch with Nigel and he'll go after an hour, half the time.
You say that. But what I would say is the person who was by his side during that period, he was working blimmin' hard, smoke coming out of his ears, but he had to always be over in Brussels. And I remember the wishful thinking of, oh, well, he won't like being an MP. Oh, the constituency work. Oh, he won't do anything. Quite frankly, I think he's loving it.
He loves being an MP. He loves representing people. That is what Nigel does. He has been waiting for this moment his entire life. And now he's there. What I'm seeing from him is a determination, a dedication not to waste it. So whatever the Conservative Party is banking on, it better not be him getting bored, going off to the US, blowing up in a heap of scandal, because so far there is not a drop of evidence that any of those things is likely to happen. And so Kemi Badenoch, the Conservative Party apparatus, if they want to go down the line of beating reform, destroying reform, continuing to be the single voice on the right, there is another approach, of course, do a deal, that kind of thing. If they want to do that, they're going to have to come up with a new strategy, and boy, they're going to have to come up with it quickly.
I can't wait to find out about the things because as head of media, I bet I was the one, my phone melting, having to deal with all the things you were raking through people's social media accounts, like whack-a-mole that back then, and you would... I can't believe this. Well, you kept me busy, that's for sure. Someone sent me a link here. I can't open it on this in front of me, but I'm going to see if I can get it during the break. It says pets and politics, Liberals and Conservatives.
Yeah, I've got the data.
Have you got the data?
I've got the data.
Good. Well, okay, come on.
So, I'm afraid I'm right.
No!
9 out of 10 states where in America, most states in America, 9 out of 10 states where dog ownership is highest voted Republican. Out of the 10 states where cat ownership is highest, 6 out of 10 went Democrat. For men, these are snapshots before the election. For men that like dogs, 16-point lead for Trump, 8-point lead for Kamala Harris. For women that like cats, it was... for women, those that like dogs, Kamala Harris had just an 8-point lead. For those that like cats, 15-point lead. It makes about 10% difference between whether or not you're going to be a Conservative or a Liberal. You are, I'm afraid, a Liberal.
But, the problem is that, that A, that's America. Apples and pears. And B, I don't have a B. I'm just unhappy about it. There you are. Alex isn't happy, so we're going to find new data that makes her happy. Thanks for your research. Right, going to take a short break now, but when I pop back up, you're going to be joining me because we're going to have some of you on the blower. 03444 991,000 is the number to call if you want to be patched through to the studio. Keep it keen and clean. Text me 8722, but talk before your message. We're on X at talkTV, and I'm back after this.
What do you think Labour has actually done well?
So far in government, I think what they've done is they've turned around the country economically to a different position, a different way of doing things. Ultimately, they've made difficult
downwards?
that even I disagree with.
The economy is worse now than it was when Labour took over.
Right now, yeah, we're talking 5.5 months in.
But you just told me they've done a brilliant job with the economy.
About a long-term...
Hang on a minute, you just said what Labour did well was the economy.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Hello there, welcome back to the show. Now, this is some of the most alarming, shocking material that's ever been put on my desk. We were just discussing during the advert break about our GCSEs, which for me was a gazillion years ago. But I still just about remember it. And I read the book that I think everybody read for English Lit GCSE, as did you, Sam, and you're 10 years younger than me, of Mice and Men. Apparently, it's being taken off the Welsh GCSE list because it's too psychologically damaging. It's emotionally harmful for children. That's the blimmin' point. It's got my favourite word to use on this show is catharsis. That's what it did.
Well, it's funny because, curiously, it joins England, where it was taken off the list, I think, rightly. I'm going to defend taking it off the list. I'm going to defend taking it off. Firstly, it's an American piece of literature. It's not English literature. There are so many tomes in the English canon that are written here, refer to our picture, our national story, etc. And secondly, I just think it's not that good a book. I'm going to say it. As I said, it's sort of a glib, quite superficial.
You got people being shot in the back of the head. You got molestation. You got poverty. You got people going down the cat house, cripples.
What do you learn? What do you learn from it? What's the great lesson of Mice and Men? I don't know. I did GCSE.
When someone becomes a burden, pop one between the eyes. Well, no, that's not what you learn. That is not what I'm advocating. But I was just trying to think there on the spot, and that is kind of how the book ends. If you haven't read it, I'm sorry for spoiling it. But but the idea that this is psychologically and emotionally harmful, particularly to black children, right? Now, I remember, what's the name of the black character in of Mice and Men? Someone's gonna tell me in a minute in my ear.
I didn't enjoy it as much as you.
Yeah, good. Alicia's looking it up right now. It was a great book. You had Curly Watts. You had that old one.
You had the big one and the little one. That's about my memory.
Lenny. No, Lenny and George were the main characters. Curly was the fisty one. Crooks the black character, and he had a bit of a limp or something, didn't he? Well, the whole point is about having the black character who was ostracised and made to feel like he wasn't part of the rest of them and sort of had his own little place. Like, oh, go see old Crooks round the other corner of the barn, because he wasn't allowed to be with the rest of them. And then he sort of was this amazing character who redeemed himself and was the one who had some sort of understanding and sympathy for Lenny. It was a narrative all about ostracisation and proper relationships and societal divides, which I think is really constructive to getting people to talk about these issues. Not like, let's not talk about them, it's all just psychologically and emotionally harmful, everyone's just a permanent victim. What nonsense. If you don't like it because it's American, you think it's a bit glib, fine. Emotionally harmful, get a grip. Anyway, that just really upset me. Alicia and I were just discussing in the break how much we used to love it when the television got rolled out of the cabinet and we all got to watch it on telly. I love the TV days. You probably went to a posh school that didn't allow you to have TV days.
Well, look, I think you've had a tough day, so I'll take that abuse. You've learned that cats are left wing and your favourite book has been banned.
Well, you know what would happen if this was of Mice and Men? You'd shoot me in the back of the head. Please don't. Let's get on the phones now and speak to Christine, who's in Inverness. Hi, Christine.
Sorry. Hello, Alex. Nice to speak to you. And I'm another cat person, and I'm certainly not left-wing. I've recently joined Reform. Anyway, I was wanting to have a word with you about devolution. I think people in Scotland can talk quite clearly about devolution. We actually pay extra taxes in order to live in Scotland because of devolution. Nothing is working. The islands off the west coast invariably don't have ferry sailing because the ferry fleet is well past its use-by date. The new ferries, which are supposed to cost £80 million each, are at 500 million and are still not sailing. One actually did sail last month, but it's been taken off again. It's a nightmare. We've got 4 ferries apparently coming from Turkey, but they've now been delayed. As far as I'm concerned, devolution is a luxury that cannot be afforded. And when you see the calibre of those that allegedly represent us, when you talk about the old town councils, the calibre of people there, far, far above what we've got in this hellhole in Edinburgh.
Yeah, do you know, like I said, well, devolution gave you Nicola Sturgeon and Hamza Yusuf, you lucky things. But no, it's you very much reflect my view on this, which is sort of changing quite radically. I never used to be this anti-devolution until I've become lately. Christine in Inverness, from the horse's mouth there, so to speak, giving us her view on what devolution has done for Scotland. Not much. Probably more harm than good. I've got to say, by the way, when I was talking about all those narratives of mice and men, that is within the context of discussing the framework of that book. In no way do I advocate for certain narratives that may be discussed in that book. In no way do I think that it's psychologically harmful for children to be taught these in school, because I think it's important that we talk about things in the open air, and that kids need to learn some tough lessons, and the value of the arts. Enabling them to do that is very important. I did literature at university alongside philosophy, which is why I'm so wise. Let's speak now to Herbie, who's in Harrow. Hi, Herbie.
Yes, good afternoon, Alex. How are you? And Merry Christmas to you.
Merry Christmas to you too. I'm very well.
And, well, I think we got a real bull in the china shop along with his cronies. I really think that's... and for the first time in my life, there's one person I won't be wishing a very Merry Christmas to, I can assure you that. That's a dead cert.
Well, I think a lot of people might tend to agree with you there, Herbie. Thank you very much. Short and sweet, that one. I liked it very much. Which gives us good time to have a little break and move on after the break to talking about... I love the fact that this report's come out, which is essentially that the Labour's net zero drive is going to create 170,000 jobs. But where? We're going to tell you after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Hello there, welcome back. Now, I teased you a little bit before the break by saying, did you know that net zero is going to create 170,000 jobs? That is what we've always been told. The green economy is going to be brilliant. All this stuff, I'm going to be making the wind farms and the solar panels, and everyone's going to be like, woo, money's everywhere, like that final bit in the crystal maze where you've got to snatch all the gold tokens. But the problem is, these jobs are not going to be in Hartlepool. They're not going to be in Ashfield. They're not going to be in Inverness. They're not going to be in Penzance. Where are those jobs going to be? I know a man who might know. Head of Policy at the Global Warming Policy Foundation, Harry Wilkinson. Hi, Harry.
Hello there.
Now, I think people have already guessed this, but 170,000 new jobs, net zero drive. Where are they going to be? It doesn't take a genius to work out that they're all going to be in China.
China.
Yeah, of course. I always say net zero is basically a big charity check over to Beijing for them to, I don't know, have sort of huge slave factories where they incarcerate Uyghurs. And yet the Labour government going over there, all sort of, you know, touchy-feely handshakes, let's renew our relationship with China, just as the MI5 and MI6 are saying Chinese spy activity couldn't be any bigger in the United Kingdom. It's just geopolitically insane following this drive, isn't it?
Well, there's this curious alignment between everything net zero and China's interest, whether that's wind turbines, solar panels, electric vehicles. They're all being made in China. And almost everything we do on the net zero front seems to be making it more difficult to produce things here in the UK and in Europe. And more incentive, therefore, for people to bring in goods from China, where they actually produce all this on the cheap. And how do they do it? They do it through coal. You know, you don't get cheap electricity, and particularly cheap industrial electricity and cheap energy for industrial purposes with renewables. You get that through fossil fuels. That's what China knows. It's continuing to burn enormous amounts of coal, and that allows it to produce all of these things on the cheap while we impose these devastating net zero targets on ourselves. And of course, the way that we measure emissions here in the UK is to look at our territorial emissions. So as those factories close, we say, what a great success, we're reducing our emissions. And of course, we've seen government ministers standing outside coal power stations as they get blown up and saying, isn't this wonderful? You know, as those jobs are lost, as we produce less and less here in the UK. And of course, if we look at our consumption-based emissions, that's our actual carbon footprint from the goods and services that we consume, we see the reduction has been much more modest. So this isn't the kind of collective thinking that we need to actually be better for the environment and, you know, better for the economy as well. This is just a very limited approach devised by civil servants, and they're putting these narrow targets in front of ordinary jobs, the cost of energy, and of course livelihoods of the people that rely on these industries. We've seen the chemical industry in particular suffer 37% just since the pandemic down. This was an industry actually we had real expertise in here in the UK, and that's been really suffering because of the high energy costs. We're told wind is cheap. We've heard that refrain so many times in the last 5 years. However, we actually have the most expensive industrial and domestic electricity prices in the world. So something isn't working.
Yeah, I mean, I just think with all of this, when it comes to the UK could go net zero forever, for eternity, I don't think it's going to move the needle one iota. And it seems to be in order for the UK to go net zero, we're having to export that carbon footprint to other people who get the economic benefit of actually being the manufacturers, and probably actually increases carbon in the atmosphere because you've got to have a load of factories making these things. It's a huge con, essentially, that is tying our hands behind the back. We're never going to have any growth with this particular strategy. But the problem is, of course, if we suddenly went, OK, do you know what, let's try and onshore this, I don't think we could we? Because we don't essentially produce, we don't really have British steel. Where are the factories that we're going to make this in? Where is the skilled workforce? It would take us 2-3 generations in order to get to the stage where China's at, poised and ready to make anything that anyone could ever desire.
That's the really tragic thing about what's happened, because once these industries have closed, it's very difficult to build up those kind of industrial clusters where these skills can be developed over time, and you see these industries develop. So, how should we go about net zero? I think it should all be about competition. You're right to say we're just a tiny share of emissions globally. What we're doing doesn't really matter in terms of our own emissions. It's not going to make a big difference to climate change. But if we can develop the kind of technologies that can get electricity costs down, then we'll see those wider economic impacts from that are positive here in the UK. We'll also see that technology developed elsewhere. We see small modular reactors potentially seeing some progress. There's also lots of American companies developing these. We've got to push ahead with these technologies and find ones that actually are cost competitive. Why would renewables need all these subsidies if they were really as cheap as our politicians have been saying?
I mean, this is the trick, isn't it, Sam? So I remember back during lockdown, actually, the very, very first start of lockdown, when I was sitting at home unable to do anything, I got a call from a friend and said, "Oh, you've been in politics, I want you to help me with something." And it was all about these small modular reactors, which are sort of mini nuclear power stations. And we're very good at that technology already. That's how we power our submarines, which is why we sold a load to the Australians and the French missed out, because they still wanted to, I don't know, put some sort of nozzle in and fill the things up with diesel, which means they have to surface far sooner. So we've essentially got the technology. Rolls-Royce think they can develop these into sort of proper little pop-up jobs. And I was contacted by a mate who said, look, I'm working with America. They want an Anglo-American project to develop this technology. It was headed by Mike Pompeo, and the express purpose was to tackle China. Now, that is going back now almost 5 years, and I still keep in touch with these people trying to do their lobbying. And what they found is, under the Conservative government, they could get nowhere. No one listened, no one picked up the phone, no one could be bothered meeting them. And also people are saying, oh, well, this is all about Ed Miliband, isn't it? It was Boris Johnson who really put the most sort of stringent net zero targets in place.
Yes, and of course Theresa May's government that allowed just 45, 90 minutes debate in order to impose the most expensive political legal change ever in this nation's history. But look, there is a huge problem, which is that politicians are all so signed up to a set of ideas that don't just touch on what's going on with the climate, which is, fine, that's one thing, fair enough, but also a set of solutions. And they're not prepared to tackle those that are actually causing the problems, which is exactly the same people that we're sending things to. So what is happening is, instead of making things here in this country, we're making them overseas, where they use even more carbon and importing them into this country. Which
uses even more carbon.
Which uses even more carbon. We now have industrial energy prices 4 times what they are in the United States. You can't build an industrial society, an industrial economy, if you've got energy prices that are that high. Impossible. Doesn't work.
Yeah, I mean, look, Harry, what do you think the solution is here? We speak about small modular reactors. Do you sort of sign up to the idea that we need an energy mix, that actually there is a place for solar, there is a place for wind? Do you think that we should start reversing the sort of phasing out at a very fast pace now? It's not so much phasing out, but just deleting, in some instances, fossil fuels from that energy mix?
Well, it's a very important question. It's the question that should be on everybody's minds. How do we have a system that can find solutions and get our energy prices down? I think what we need is fundamental reform of the electricity market, because it shouldn't be up to you or to me to predict which technologies are going to be best. What we should have is companies providing a mix of technologies, finding out how they can make that as affordable as possible, rather than actually what we have at the moment, where you just contract with wind and solar farms for long-term contracts for electricity. What they're not bringing into account is this idea of firm power that actually can be relied upon 24/7. So we should have competition for firm power. We should make wind and solar compete on a level playing field with gas and nuclear and other technologies, that they should actually have to provide power that's available all the time. And if they're competing on that level playing field, which I think we need, then the market can discover which is the best way to do that. So I don't want to prejudge that and say this is going to be better, that's going to be better. None of us actually know. We need to have that competition to actually let the market find out, because markets have always been the best way to do this.
Harry, thank you ever so much. That was Harry Wilkinson, Head of Policy at the Global Warming Policy Foundation. Global warming, we don't get to say that anymore. It's just climate change, hasn't it? That's what it's become now. Right, before I go today, after this advert break, I'm going to be giving you a little update on Christmas travel. So if you haven't done the great Christmas getaway and you're packing up your bags and your presents and you're off to see Nana, or if you're luckily flying somewhere sunnier, really, to enjoy the festive period, then you might want to stay tuned, because I'm going to be joined by Simon Calder just after this.
Got a Secret Santa.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fine. And what do you? And are you one of?
I've bought for the siblings, bought for the parents.
How many siblings?
I've got 2 siblings, but not here to show off. But if I can make one semi-serious point from over
yes.
Online culture for shopping is great and Amazon is wonderful, but let's remember our small businesses.
I agree.
Which are struggling this Christmas. Where I come from, down in Honiton, Sidmouth, we have amazing small businesses in East Devon, and if you've got the opportunity to go out
politician.
and buy something from a local shop,
honestly, you're speaking
it's a
like
great
a politician.
opportunity.
No, I totally
speak
agree.
like an ordinary person, David, that wants our small business to see out this Labour government.
I totally agree.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
You're right there, Sam. But he's really suffering, sitting in the corner, blowing his nose. He's a right old mess. He's going to look like Rudolph by the end of this. Well done for surviving 3 hours. Right, now, if you're planning to get anywhere today, perhaps you are in your car right now, tuning in to me as you're on the move. Perhaps you're not on the move. You might want to know what the roads, the rails, the aeroplanes and the boats are looking like, because apparently if you live up in the north of Scotland there, you might find you can't island hop as easily as you may hope. But let's catch up with Simon Calder, who's travel correspondent at The Independent. Simon, great to have you back on the programme. How is it looking out there?
Well, let's start, shall we, with the ferries, since you mentioned them. Yeah, we had a miserable day yesterday for thousands of passengers, both in the Western Isles of Scotland, because the stormy weather meant that most ferries stayed in port, but also, crucially, getting from Cairnryan in southwest Scotland across to Larne and to Belfast in Northern Ireland. And a lot of people using those routes because they couldn't actually get to travel from Holyhead to Dublin, because that, by far the most important link between Great Britain and the island of Ireland, is out of service all the way through to the 15th of January. So we had probably a dozen ferries yesterday cancelled, and they were all very heavily booked. Anybody who's in Northern Ireland or Scotland and wants to get to the other side of the Irish Sea, it's going to prove, I'm afraid, quite tricky. And we've also, as you say, on the Western Isles, got more cancellations, or at least warnings of them tomorrow. Caledonia McBrain saying that there will be adverse weather. And for instance, if you were hoping to sail from Barra to Oban, beautiful Scottish island in the south of the Outer Hebrides, the ferry has just been moved earlier by 3 hours in the morning. You'll need to get there at 4 a.m. So that's the sort of thing that people are facing on the ferries. But if you're sticking to dry land, not too bad. I'm here at Paddington Station. It's going to be closed from Christmas Eve, and bear in mind that all the trains across the land will all be getting home early on Christmas Eve and not going anywhere on Christmas Day. Very few trains running on Boxing Day, but when everything starts up on Friday the 27th, well, it won't here. This station's going to remain closed until the 30th of December, and across town at London Liverpool Street, Britain's busiest station, that's going to be closed completely from end of play tomorrow right up until the 2nd of January. So it's really important to check in advance, because this is when those Network Rail engineers get all their important work done.
Wow, I mean, you know, that's quite shocking, actually. At one point, I was mulling over whether to go and see my parents this Christmas. I'm largely working here, and I thought, I'll make my mind up in the future, because I can always hop on a train Christmas Eve to get to Gloucester and back on Boxing Day. Well, I couldn't, could I? So just as well I'm invited elsewhere.
Well, you would be able to, in the sense that there are ways of getting there. There's bus replacement services, of course. You can use the link from London Waterloo to Reading and then connect. And there's actually going to be some trains, not going to Gloucester, but certainly going to South Wales and to Devon and Cornwall, which will be going to and from London Euston, which is the hub for the West Coast Main Line. And while we're on the subject of that line, which serves the West Midlands, North West England, North Wales, Southern Scotland, that's going to have work being done after Christmas in the Crewe area, and that will merge seamlessly on New Year's Eve with the very first of the latest series of strikes by train managers working for Avanti West Coast. Those will be happening intermittently right up until the 25th of May.
Blimey. Doesn't seem like it's a great situation out there on the railroads. So with that in mind, what about the roads?
Okay. If you're listening at home or watching at home, hats off to you. Have another cup of tea. Don't think of going anywhere, because we're just getting into the really, really busy time. It's going to be a busy old afternoon. Very few actual real commuters on the roads. Maybe that explains the poor growth figures that Talk has been reporting. But there will be an awful lot of congestion on the main arteries and around the big shopping locations as well this afternoon. Best to wait until tea time to set off, or go early tomorrow morning. Tomorrow's going to be the main getaway rush. Everybody's setting off to be where they need to be in place for the 25th. And so therefore, if you can start off very early in the morning, or indeed leave it till later in the evening, that's going to be how you're going to avoid problems on the roads. It's one of those things, there's always stuff that comes up, but anything that you can do to avoid the western half of the M25 around London, the M1 going north from Luton to Northampton, the M6 through the West Midlands, and the M5 south of Bristol, you're probably going to be glad you did.
Simon, thank you ever so much. Any updates, by the way, before I let you go, on airports and flights and things like that, for people going off to sunnier climes, or colder climes even, if they're skiers?
Most people are getting where they need to be. The crucial thing is that we have 100 cancellations in and out of Heathrow yesterday. That's 15,000 people with their travel plans messed up. Dozens of cancellations from Belfast City Airport. Again, those that's now running. Heathrow's running normally, but all those people whose flights were cancelled now go to the back of the queue, desperately trying to find seats in what we have remaining, which I make 35 hours left before Christmas Day.
Simon, it's been fantastic catching up with you. Bad news for people if they wanted to get somewhere by and large, but always lovely having your company. You deliver bad news with such joy and grace. The best man for the job. And Merry Christmas if I don't see you before then. Oh, look at what I've got under the tree.
Look at what has I was going to say come down your chimney, but I'm not sure that would be an appropriate thing to say these days.
I think it was kind of inappropriate making the inappropriate joke about that, but, you know, no, I loved it. Love a bit of innuendo. 5-1 on to the eve of Christmas Eve.
You'll always get that with me because
I know.
I am here. It's a Christo Christmas here at Talk for the next 6 or 7 days. I'm here.
We said they call on the old God, don't they?
It's the 7 days of Christo.
Oh, wonderful. And what does day one involve?
Day one involves, what do you think of Labour's handling of the economy so far?
Genius, masterful. Honestly, I want to put them in charge of my personal finances. Yeah. If he was the CEO of this company, I'd be giving him a massive bonus.
It's amazing that how bad the last lot were, and they appear to have made it worse, which is an achievement in itself.
Yes.
And it's something none of us perhaps expected to be as bad as it is, but we'll talk about that and whether you are personally affected by what's going on. Obviously, I know that you'll have been discussing the terrible doom and gloom on many of the front pages today about just how dire things are. 16-year-olds getting the vote. Travel chaos. We'll talk about that as well, because obviously I know you're talking to Simon. He's out and about for us today. Apparently 800 trains cancelled. I was going to go and see a friend in St Albans for a Christmas drink tonight, and it would have involved what was an 18-minute train journey, 2 hours and 45 minutes on a replacement bus, and that would have cost me £30 for the privilege.
Yeah, the three most harrowing words in the English language: replacement bus service. Where are you going, Sam? Do you have to maybe to a morgue by the looks of things? But before that, if you do manage to go somewhere for Christmas,
I'm hopeful to get off to Essex as soon as humanly possible. Maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow.
Driving?
No, with a train, so we'll have to
good luck with that.
Oh, indeed.
Because no one needs to get anywhere at Christmas. Did you know that in this country we don't think anyone needs to go anywhere for Christmas?
But it's always the theme, isn't it? I referenced Home Alone earlier. The sort of major theme of that is chaos at the airport. So I think it's just sort of like a, international thing of Christmas.
But
that's why Santa uses a sleigh.
But you can work from home. You can't kind of do Christmas on your own at home. Well, you can, but it's pretty grim.